explosions, but we do have videotape of both of the explosions now that have come into the newsroom. This is the immediate aftermath. You can see people near the blast site lying on the sidewalk near the finish line, conscious but clearly wounded. We also have videotape of the two explosions themselves. Let me show that to you one more time. This is the smoke clearing from the first explosion. Now, as the camera begins to pan left in about 10 seconds, you're going to see the second explosion down the street, about a block away. And there that one is. The Boston Police Department is telling us now that 2 people have in fact been killed and 22 people have been injured in these twin explosions at the finish line of the Boston Marathon. This is official from the Boston Police Department coming to us now. 2 confirmed dead at this point, 22 wounded. Those numbers will change as we learn more, of course. Major Garrett is at the White House for us today. And Major, you're seeing some activity around there even.
Yes, a security development worth sharing with you, Scott. Right now, the Secret Service, just to my right, on the outside of the perimeter of the White House, is beginning to cordon off Pennsylvania Avenue, just north of this entrance to the White House. There's a considerable number of Secret Service vehicles moving into the scene. Pedestrians are not being allowed to approach the White House along Pennsylvania Avenue on the southern side, and now they're beginning to put yellow security tape near the southernmost part of Lafayette Square. So there is a little bit of security situation going on Pennsylvania Avenue simply to limit pedestrian access to the closest parts of the White House fence. That is something that we see with some regularity, but it is clearly in response to this event in Boston. We reported earlier that there is some activity of this kind in New York going on. Cities on the eastern seaboard appear to be sensitized very highly to what's going on in Boston, and we're seeing some Secret Service activity just outside the Northwest Gate here at the White House.
Major, thank you. Now, these were relatively small explosions, but they were in a very crowded space. This is the finish line of the Boston Marathon. Thousands of runners, even more spectators. You can see them lining behind the blue fence there. You can see the spectators shoulder to shoulder and very deep. Many hundreds or thousands of spectators all along the 26-mile route. We're just getting these new pictures in now of the immediate aftermath of the explosions. Now, we don't know why they are saying this, but the Boston Marathon officials are now describing the explosions as having been caused by bombs. This is not official from the police or the fire department, but the Boston Marathon officials are describing the explosions as having been caused by bombs. We have videotape of the 2 explosions. Here is the first one. You see the smoke clearing. In about 10 seconds, as the camera pans left, you'll see the second explosion, which is about, to my eye, about a block away. And here it comes next. About 15 seconds separates the 2 blasts. You can see the runners still coming up Boylston Street to the finish line there as the explosions occur. We also have a very short clip that we're running on a loop that shows that first blast. Here it comes again. Watch for it. That is the first explosion. You see one of the runners goes down immediately. That is apparently the area where the largest number of casualties has occurred. The Boston Police Department is now telling us officially that 2 people have been killed and 22 people wounded in these twin explosions at the Boston Marathon.
And Scott, you can imagine what the concussive force must have been for the gentleman to go down many feet from where the bomb went off, and then another person went off in the middle of the street. And of course, that's one of the ways that people get injured, whether they're hit by flying glass or shrapnel-like material, but just the concussion of it blows them away, and it can cause brain trauma.
Bob Orr is in our Washington newsroom. Bob, what are you hearing?
Scott, as you pointed out, the Boston Marathon folks are now labeling this twin bombs. The government will not go that far, but I have to tell you that they are proceeding down the belief that that's very likely what happened here. I mean, what's influencing their thinking here is the coordinated or the apparently coordinated nature of this. You have one explosion that takes place, and then a short time later, as you've been showing folks, and at fairly close distance, a second explosion. That seems to indicate some level of orchestration, some level of planning and coordination. Now, we want to be careful because there is no hard evidence at this point that these were deliberately planted, but if this were to be some kind of attack, domestic or foreign, among the things that those kinds of groups would look for would be a high casualty count, a crowded area. It would be an extra plus to do it near an area where there's lots of security, i.e. the finish line, and there would be more than one device. So those are the things, when you're starting from zero with very few facts, that you look at and say, we have to look hard to see if this was some kind of attack. On the other side of the ledger, of course, there could be another explanation, less nefarious for this, but as time goes on, I think they're more easily able to rule out things like natural gas breaks and that kind of thing. The federal government is just now getting to a posture where it's getting experts there into the scene. The FBI, agents from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, because, as you can imagine, they were caught like the rest of us unaware of this. There was security in place, but there was not a triage and forensic team in place, evidence collectors, if you will. Now, this is important also. If this is some kind of broad-based attack, and we're not saying that it is, we're not even saying there's signs of that, but if this were to be some kind of broader attack, we could look for problems other places, and that's why you see major cities like New York and Washington now moving to a somewhat higher level of preparedness. We're in the hours where the officials, the state and local officials, and the federal officials really don't know what they're up against. So they're going to err on the side of extreme caution. You'll see things like streets shut down, airspace closed, transit lines disrupted. There will be all kinds of temporary regulations in place. They will tighten this down across the board, and not just in Boston, until they get a clearer picture. And at that point, then, they can start opening the valves against Scott and letting things get back to normal. But we're still in the very early going here, and I would repeat what I've said a couple of times. To this point, there is no credible claim of responsibility, and there is nothing that I'm told in the threat pipeline before this event that signaled any kind of a potential targeting of the Boston Marathon, Scott.
Bob, thank you. Threat pipeline, of course, meaning that there was nothing in the intelligence community. The intelligence community hadn't picked up any kind of chatter or anything among known terrorist groups that might have suggested that something was coming. But what Bob was describing as a sort of a national response, a terrorist response, we are already beginning to see some evidence of. Major Garrett at the White House is seeing the Secret Service locking down the area around Pennsylvania Avenue, around the White House. And David Martin at the Pentagon is telling us that the military, the Air Force, is sending aircraft to fly a combat air patrol essentially over the top of Boston to make sure that there aren't any airspace violations that are not authorized. And so we are beginning to see a reaction up and down the East Coast here to this event. The Boston Marathon officials have said that these were bombs that struck near the finish line at about 2:10 this afternoon Eastern Time. The authorities have not made that official, but that's what the marathon people have told us. And in about 15 or 20 minutes, the Boston Police Department tells us they're going to have a news conference to try to fill us in on the details. What we do know from the Boston Police Department at this point is that officially 2 people have been killed, at least 22 wounded in 2 explosions that struck about 10 minutes after 2 o'clock near the finish line of the Boston Marathon. That's the aftermath of the first explosion. You see the smoke clearing there, a blast on the sidewalk amid the crowd. Now look down the road as the camera pans left. There is the second explosion about a block away. Boston police telling us 2 are dead, 22 wounded. We have seen quite a number of people taken away, bleeding, kind of trauma that you might expect from the shrapnel from an explosion. There have been men, women, and several children taken away. Quite a number of people wounded in all of this. We have new videotape of an eyewitness who was at the scene during the explosion. Let's listen into that for just a moment.
There were some bad-looking people, and I'm praying for all of them. We are all trying to put pressure on all the wounds for everybody, tourniquets and whatever we could do, and it was chaos.
John LaPuca, clearly from the videotape and from the witnesses, bleeding is the thing that is,
right.
Is causing so much trouble for these people.
And the gentleman mentioned tourniquets, and of course that's a classic way to stop bleeding. You just take something, you tie it, you try to make the pressure higher than the pressure of the artery, and that shuts off the bleeding.
But it suggests arterial bleeding.
Arterial
very
bleeding,
serious.
and that's serious, and you can bleed out very quickly from that, and that's why it's so important for them to get first aid.
We've got an update now on the number wounded. The Boston police are telling us 2 dead, 23 wounded now, but of course those numbers will change as the information becomes more solid on what is a terrible, terrible day at the Boston Marathon. That is the first explosion. The area behind that blue fence is jammed with spectators. Behind all those flags, hundreds of people watching the finish line of the Boston Marathon. You can see that runner right in the middle go down immediately from the concussive blast that occurred there. Police and fire officials have not told us what caused these explosions, but we are beginning to see security tightened up in key areas along the East Coast. Security has gone up even tighter than usual around the White House. David Martin reports from the Pentagon that the Air Force will be flying combat aircraft over Boston to make sure that the airspace is clear. The NYPD in New York, as it always does during a terrorist attack anywhere in the world, has stepped up its security in the nation's largest city, and that is ongoing now. There is no indication that any other attack is imminent, if indeed this was an attack. We don't have any indication of that whatsoever at this point, but security is going up in various places all around the country. The explosions happened about 2 o'clock, a little after 2 o'clock Eastern Time, 2:10, at the finish line of the Boston Marathon. It was first one explosion, and then about 15 seconds later, there was another. That is the smoke clearing from the first explosion. And as the camera pans to the left here in about 10 seconds, you'll see the second explosion down the street, about a block away. Boston police are telling us 2 dead, 23 wounded. We've seen men, women, and children being taken to ambulances, being taken away in wheelchairs. And we are expecting a news conference from the Boston Police Department a little bit later this afternoon. They're saying 4:30, but these things have a tendency to slip. Dr. John LaPuca is joining us now. Doctor, you've been talking to some of the people that you know in the medical community there. What do you know now?
Right. We've learned that 19 patients so far have been taken to Massachusetts General Hospital. Now, this is one of the great hospitals in the world with a terrific trauma center, so they are in a terrific place. And I'm sure what they're doing right now is just assessing them, making sure that their vital signs are okay, and making sure that their blood counts are okay, because there's potential to lose a lot of blood when you get these kind of injuries.
But Boston, Mass General, the other hospitals around it,
Brigham,
level 1 trauma centers, the very best care available.
The very best care available. I've been up there and I've visited these units, and they're as good as anywhere in the world.
Major Garrett at the White House for us has a little more information about what the president was told and when he was told. Major?
Yes, Scott, the White House tells us the president was notified of the Boston situation about 3 p.m. this afternoon, and then he received a separate briefing from his new White House counterterrorism Homeland Security advisor, Lisa Monaco, and other members of his senior staff. This occurred in the Oval Office shortly after 3 p.m. After that, the president called Mayor Tom Menino of Boston and the governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Deval Patrick, offering his condolences for the victims and offering his full support of the federal government in all of its ways to deal with the situation both immediately and medium and long term. Scott.
Major, thank you very much. If you're just joining us, I'd like to recap what we know at this point. There were 2 explosions near the finish line of the Boston Marathon about 10 minutes after 2 o'clock. That's the first one. Smoke clearing after the explosion, and in just about 10 more seconds, you'll see the second explosion as the camera pans to the left. It's down the block, about a block away. And there it is. The Boston police are telling us that they have confirmed 2 people have been killed, at least 23 have been injured. You can see some of the photographs that are coming into the newsroom now of people being evacuated from the scene. These explosions were not large, but they were in an incredibly crowded area. This was the finish line of the Boston Marathon, where there were thousands of spectators, people standing shoulder to shoulder along that sidewalk where the explosions occurred. After the second explosion, and in fact about half an hour ago, there was a third explosion, but we were told by the Boston police that this was a controlled explosion that the police themselves set off on purpose because they believe that they had found a third explosive device. This was told to one of our reporters, Kylie Atwood, and that they decided to detonate that device rather than let it go off, of course, on its own. Now, that's one report, but there was the sound of a third explosion about half an hour ago, and we're told that that was deliberately done by the Boston Police Department to clear another device. There has not been any official confirmation that bombs caused these explosions, but the Boston Marathon officials are describing them as bombs, and we are expecting to hear from the Boston Police Department in a news conference in 10 or 15 minutes' time. Bob Orr has been talking to his sources in Washington. Bob, what do you know now?
Scott, I want to be careful here and take you through this very slowly, so bear with me. But after the event, the government started looking at all intelligence sources and started to comb through every potential source of information. And so far, at this point, they do not see anything in the aftermath of the explosions in Boston that lead them to think that this is part of anything bigger. Now, this is very important. They're not seeing any kind of chatter. They're not seeing any kind of normal markers that you might expect if this were, say, an opening wave of something bigger. That doesn't mean that we can rule out that possibility, but it is encouraging, at least at a minimum, that right now this is starting to look, and I say starting to look, like it might be focused solely on Boston. We don't want to get too far down this road because there are so many unknowns. We know, because we've seen the videotape and we've heard from the witnesses about the 2 explosions, there are multiple reports of other possible devices at various locations around the Boston area. We have to say that what's happening here is, as the bomb squads start to check them out, they are disrupting them. They're purposely setting them off. And this is what is done to neutralize any potential threat. That doesn't mean these are real devices. It doesn't mean they are actual bombs. It doesn't mean they would have gone off. There may still be something else out there we don't know about. And in fact, they're still responding right now to other calls. But this is the kind of thing that happens in the chaotic hours right after we have an event like this. There are a lot of phone calls, a lot of tips. People see a lot of things, and police take no chances. Right now, as far as we know, there were the 2 explosions we've documented. We don't know if they were bombs or not, but I have to tell you that investigators are starting to look at that and say, that's what it seems to be. That seems to be the most likely explanation because of the coordinated and a sequential nature of that. But beyond that, in looking at the threat matrix, we don't see anything right now. And I would say, emphasize, we don't know everything here, but we don't see anything right now that connects this to some kind of broader plot targeting other places. So that's at least good news for the moment. And the federal government, of course, Scott, is still combing all sources.
Bob, thank you very much. We now have 2 sources that are telling us that at least 1 more explosive device was discovered by the police and was destroyed. The Associated Press is reporting that 2 additional explosive devices were discovered by the police and were dealt with by the bomb squad. Our reporter at the scene, Kylie Atwood, has told us that she spoke with police officers who told her that one other device had been found and had been intentionally detonated by the police in order for it to be cleared. We have an eyewitness to the event, Steve Silva, who's on the telephone with us. Steve, can you tell us what you saw?
Yeah, Scott, I was down covering the finishers of the marathon, the folks coming in, between 3 and 4 hours, just sitting up on the finish line with other cameramen and videographers on, runners just straddling across the line on the perfect day. And then, boom, about 15 yards away from us, the explosion went off on the corner of Boylston and Exeter Street. And we just, first didn't know for a split second, like, was this something planned? And then you could clearly see this was something off because the smoke spread. And then you heard the screams, and we ran over there along with the police and the rescue folks. And then within 20 seconds, we heard another explosion, another block up on Boylston, Fairfield Street, right at the same time. So then we knew that something was serious. And I got up, close to the scene, and it was a horrific scene, much like we see in the news in the Middle East and things like that. I saw limbs severed. I knew there were going to be people dead in the case. There was blood everywhere, and it was just a chaotic scene at that point. The police were trying to get there, get everyone off the street because it was a crime scene. You had all the runners coming in. It was full-on panic.
Steve Silva. Steve, can you tell us a little bit about the injured people that you saw? What were the nature of the injuries? What did you see?
A lot of people, were cuts, a lot of cuts and bruises. There was an explosion at the Marathon Sports Shop, and I guess the glass blew out at the first explosion that was down there Exeter. So the glass blew out, and obviously you had facial cuts, you had limbs cuts. I saw someone with a severed leg, unfortunately, and it got worse from there. It was just a horrific, bloody scene. People sprawled out all over the sidewalk, blood all over the sidewalk. The police had to come and move the partitions back to get to the injured. The bulk of the medical people were in the tent treating the runners, so they used to just treating runners from exhaustion and such, and they suddenly had to scramble and get up the street as fast as we could and then get the ambulances in there. Streets were shut down, so it was a difficult situation to treat.
Steve Silva, sports reporter covering the Boston Marathon. Steve, thank you very much. Boston police have now officially told us that there are 2 dead, at least 23 wounded in 2 explosions at the Boston Marathon. This occurred about 2:10 Eastern Time. 2 explosions very near the finish line, one right at the finish line, another one, it appeared, about a block shy of the finish line on Boylston Street in Boston. We do not have official word that the explosions were caused by bombs, but the Boston Marathon officials are describing them as bombs. We have received reports from our own reporter and also from the Associated Press that the police found at least 1 and maybe 2 additional explosive devices that the Boston bomb squad has dealt with. Bob Orr has been talking to his sources in federal law enforcement. Bob, what do you know?
Scott, we've been careful, as we should be, in something like this because we don't have anywhere close to all the facts here. And we've laid out all the possibilities. These could be explosive devices. These could be something accidental. But when we asked a federal official a short time ago, are we safe in assuming that these are bombs, he said, quote, heck yes, what else could they be? And he didn't say heck. So the presumption on behalf of the federal investigators now is they are dealing with explosive devices that didn't accidentally end up there, but that somebody obviously carried there. But again, that's just the first working theory. We have no idea if they were devices, what they were made of, or how large they were. We've seen the videotape, and it's very hard to judge from the videotape, but it seems to be consistent with a relatively small type of explosive that could be easily hidden in a trash canister, perhaps in a backpack. I mean, this is a big public event. There's all kinds of security there. But in a crowd, in a huge crowd where people are carrying, coolers and lunchboxes and backpacks, it is not a stretch, and it's not hard to conceive how somebody, if they wanted to do this, could carry something in quite harmful like a small explosive device. But again, The federal government, Scott, is just getting its experts there. They're calling in extra bomb squad resources this to handle all the other calls they're getting. They're flooding the zone, so to speak, and hoping, really hoping, that whatever's going on today is limited to today and just Boston. Other cities, of course, as we've noted, Scott, are moving to a somewhat higher posture of security as well.
Bob, thank you very much. Dr. John LaPook has been talking to his sources in the medical community in Boston. You have some new information.
Right. Dr. Alistair Khan says 19 patients, 6 critical, like a bomb explosion in Baghdad or Israel.
6 in critical condition, according to this physician. What hospital is that?
That's at Mass General.
At Boston
Mass General Hospital.
All right. 19 wounded at that hospital.
Correct, and that's so far, so we don't know what's still coming in.
Now, I'd like to walk you through 3 images that we have of these events that occurred about 10 minutes after 2 Eastern Time. The first is a still photograph that we have of the actual explosion near the finish line of the Boston Marathon. We'll bring that up for you now. There it is. You see in the foreground the runners running toward the finish line. That is the moment of one of these explosions. In the crowd, on the sidewalk, right next to the finish line at the Boston Marathon. Now, the next image I'd like to show you is a very short clip of videotape that shows the actual explosion. We have taken this tiny bit of videotape, and there it is. We're running it in a loop for you so that you can see what happens. Behind that blue fence, there are hundreds, probably thousands of spectators watching the finish line. You can see the blast takes one of the runners down. That man in the middle of the frame falls immediately to the ground because of the concussive effects of that explosion. Now, the third image I'd like to show you is of the 2 explosions. There is the one you just saw with the smoke clearing. This is the immediate aftermath of that. Now, in about 10 more seconds, the camera will pan to the left, and there you see the smoke from the second explosion. Looks to be about a block away. So 2 explosions there, and sources have told our reporters at the scene that police found at least 1 and maybe 2 other unexploded bombs, and that the Boston bomb squad has dealt with those.
I have a little more information, Scott. So far, the injuries at this point appear to be orthopedic in nature, but they're doing x-rays and CAT scans, I'm sure MRIs if they're needed, to see if there's anything going on in the heads. Most patients appear to be spectators. These were the spectators who were injured as opposed to the runners. And being in critical condition, all that means really is you're in the intensive care unit. Once you're there, the label is you're in critical condition. So that really doesn't tell us too much about the nature of the injury. So far, we're just going to have to wait to see what kind of reports we hear.
We have another eyewitness on the telephone, Peg Carter. Peg, can you tell us what you saw?
Yes, we were standing between just a little bit past the 26-mile mark when like a big bang occurred. It was huge. There was smoke coming out, and then a few seconds later, maybe 10 seconds later, I saw a big fireball shoot up. Debris went out. Smoke went out, and I just grabbed my stepson and started running. You know, so we just started running, and then we heard people, like everybody just started running and screaming, and somebody said that it was a bomb that went off. So we're over here on Com Ave, and they started sending people over here, and then we heard another explosion, but I don't know if they set it off, third explosion, but I don't know if that was set off by the police or what happened.
Peg, we understand that the police did detonate what they believed was a third explosive device a while after all of this occurred. Can you tell us a little bit about what you saw in terms of the people who were wounded in this?
It happened so fast. I couldn't see. I mean, I knew that there was a huge explosion and that people were hurt. I'm gonna guess, but I didn't see actual people hurt because I grabbed my son and just started running.
Peg Carter, an eyewitness to the explosions at the Boston Marathon earlier this afternoon. Peg, thank you very much. We're expecting a news conference from the Boston police shortly, but of course, because of the chaotic nature of all of this, we can't be sure exactly when that's going to happen. This is just after 2 o'clock this afternoon. You see people pulling debris back from where one of these explosions occurred in the crowd at the finish line of the Boston Marathon. The Boston police are telling us officially that 2 are dead, at least 23 are wounded. Dr. John LaPook has found from his sources in Boston that many of those patients are listed in critical condition. We have seen men, women, and children taken from the scene, bleeding, broken bones. Some people appear to have suffered amputations in these 2 explosions. A moment ago, we walked you through the 3 images that we have of these explosions. I'd like to do that one more time so that you can see what occurred just after 2. This is a still photograph. That is the explosion that you see in the distance. To orient you, this is Boylston Street. These runners in the foreground are headed toward the finish line at 26.2 miles. And that explosion has occurred on the sidewalk where there are hundreds of spectators lined up to cheer the runners on as they have finally made it to the finish line. We actually have a very short piece of videotape that shows that explosion. Here it is. We're going to run it on a loop for you so that you can see it. It's very short. Behind that blue fence, hundreds of spectators. That's where the dead and injured were. You can see that one of the runners in the middle of the road falls immediately down because of the concussive effects of that explosion. And then finally, this last picture we have of the smoke clearing from the first blast, and in about 10 seconds, as the camera pans to the left, you'll see the smoke from the second blast down the street about a block, and there it is. That's the second explosion. Bob Orr has been talking to his sources in Washington. Bob, what do you know?
Scott, we're starting to get a little bit better idea of how this may have gone down. We have a law enforcement source now telling us that the 2 devices that exploded, and he said they were devices, he called them bombs, were likely located inside trash cans near the reviewing stand. We saw that one picture, and also at another location along the parade, or rather the marathon route. In addition to that, we also are told by law enforcement sources that another device has been recovered intact and unexploded. If that turns out to be the case, and we have this on good authority that, in fact, they have this device in their hands, this will be important. Forensically, it will tell them how the devices were constructed, what they were made of, how powerful they were, and perhaps could have clues that would lead them directly to the person who put that there. On the subject of potential suspects, we have 1 law enforcement official, and I want to say, we want to be very clear here about what we know and what we're a little shaky on. We have 1 law enforcement official who has told us there is a surveillance photo of someone described as a male, we believe, carrying what looked to be a couple of backpacks in the vicinity of where these explosions took place in the minutes prior to the explosions. That's important because if they have some kind of suspicious person on a surveillance loop or on a surveillance photo, the FBI, the police, can circulate that there among all police agencies, perhaps even among spectators. How much they want to tip their hand, I don't know. And that could lead them somewhere. So these are big developments. Number 1, they're now willing to say out loud they believe these were bombs. Number 2, they think they were probably secreted in some kind of trash can. And that makes sense because after the explosions here, we heard about the warning to stay away from trash cans. And then very importantly, the 3rd device, which we know about, an unexploded device, we are told has been recovered intact. That also was in a trash receptacle near the finish line. So these are just preliminary bits of evidence, Scott, but in the end, it might help point us the right direction here.
Bob, thank you very much. So that would be our first law enforcement confirmation that explosive devices were behind these explosions in Boston. And apparently, this attack was meant to be even graver than it has been. 2 bombs apparently have exploded, but at least 1 other has been discovered by police. And in fact, we're our reporters being told that there may have been 2 other explosive devices that were discovered and either dismantled or disarmed by the Boston Police Bomb Squad. To bring you up to date on what we know at this moment, about 10 minutes after 2, near the finish line of the Boston Marathon, there were 2 explosions in the crowd. That is the aftermath of the first one. And as this camera pans left, in just about 10 more seconds, you will see the smoke rising from the second. There it is. Smoke rising from the second bomb, very closely coordinated. There's smoke rising about a block away. Boston police are telling us that they have confirmed officially now that 2 are dead and at least 23 have been wounded. Dr. John LaPook has been in touch with his sources in the Boston medical community, and he understands that at least 9 are in critical condition. Doctor, what kind of wounds have these people suffered?
They're mostly, Scott, orthopedic wounds, although we heard that one of the eyewitnesses talked about a severed limb, so I'm sure there have been cuts, anything from cuts and abrasions to something so serious that it's going to need major surgery. And when, of course, when you have a severing of a limb, it's not just the loss of that limb, but the loss of the blood. A lot of arterial bleeding goes on. So one of the things that these people are going to be doing when they go into the intensive care unit and into the hospital is to seeing what's their blood count, what's their blood pressure, how much resuscitation do they need. Fortunately, in a place like Mass General, and I hear there are some other hospitals involved, we're talking about major world-class trauma centers, and they've been trained to do this. I have to say, at Columbia, where I am, we have drills where we go through all sorts of exercises to make sure we act very quickly.
The best care available. John Miller, our senior correspondent, former assistant director of the FBI, has been talking to his sources. John, what are you hearing so far?
Well, right now, of course, it's a big scramble. What they're trying to do is preserve 2 distinct crime scenes where they have post-blast investigations. That's going to be critical because they're going to find evidence of the bombs that did go off. Of course, if what we're hearing is true, and it sounds like reasonably good information that they've recovered a device intact, as Bob Orr said, that gives them a big leg up. These things will be picked up. This is going to be a long crime scene to process, because when a device functions the way it's supposed to, it breaks itself into a million pieces. They're going to want to get every single one of those, because it can literally be right down to how the wire is twisted or what kind of timing device is used that will give them the bomber's signature. All of that will go to TDAC, which is the Terrorist Device Exploitation Center down at Quantico, and they'll start to go through that. That's the long game. The short game right now is one of great urgency. You see the SIOC, the Strategic Information and Operations Center at the FBI, is filled up with people now. Director Mueller is in the command room there. He's in direct touch with the Attorney General. And what they're going to do now is put together a national and, if necessary, international coordinated investigation and go wherever they have to. Boston PD, of course, is got the front lines here. Their bomb squad is very busy. And the FBI explosives section from Quantico will be sending a big team of bomb technicians up to assist on that. Not just the devices that went off, but if they recovered a device, that too.
And the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms would be involved in an explosive investigation as well.
When you have a large post-blast and a number of areas to cover, the first thing you run short on is qualified bomb techs, and ATF is always very good at providing the people they have and the expertise they have also.
We do not have any reason to believe that this is part of anything larger than an attack on the Boston Marathon finish line, but we are seeing, as is standard procedure these days, a tightening of security in many places, especially here in the East. We have seen security tightened around the White House. David Martin at the Pentagon tells us that the Pentagon is sending aircraft to cover Boston. And we have been told by the New York Police Department that they have activated their plan for heightened security at all sensitive places after a terrorist attack. Let me bring you up to date, please, on what we know at this point. About 10 minutes after 2 o'clock, at the finish line of the Boston Marathon, there were 2 explosions. There's one of them now. Caught in this still photograph, that place where you see the explosion occurring, it was jammed with spectators. This is videotape of that same explosion. Spectators behind that blue fence. Boston police are telling us now officially that 2 are dead, at least 23 have been wounded. We understand that a number of people have been wounded very seriously. There were 2 explosions, as we said, that were timed apparently to follow each other very closely. That's the first one, the smoke clearing from the first one. And as the camera pans to the left and you look down the street about a block away, you'll see the smoke. There it is from the second explosion. About 15 seconds after the first explosion, we are told that at least 1 and maybe 2 other bombs were discovered by the police after these explosions and have been either dismantled, detonated, or disarmed by the Boston Police Department. We have also on the line one of our reporters from WBZ in Boston.
Scott Pelley, it's Paul Burton here. I was actually running the Boston Marathon, finishing the race with a bunch of kids from the Ron Burton Train Village, about 5 of us, 50 yards from the explosion. Saw both of them go off. There was smoke and glass everywhere, and we did not know what it was at first. We thought it sounded like a cannon going off, and we thought that was very strange because we never heard cannons go off at any time during this race, and so we didn't know what to do. We kept on running, and then when the second explosion happened, we were stopped dead in our tracks, and that's when everyone started running in the opposite direction towards us. We were literally about 50 yards from this finish line trying to finish this race, and we saw it all unfold. I watched how the smoke and the glass came across Boylston Street. My mother and my wife were in the grandstands watching this. They were about 15 feet from the explosion. It was terrifying, and obviously there were a lot of injuries in this, and my heart goes out to the people who are injured, and apparently some people had passed away. Obviously my heart and prayers go with those families. But we knew when we heard the second explosion that this race was over.
Paul Burton of WBZ. Paul, thank you. Thank you very much. John LaPook is getting new information from the hospitals involved. John, what are you hearing?
Right. Boston Brigham and Women's is now reporting unofficially that there are 18. This is from somebody who I know there. It's not the official report.
18
but
wounded.
That there are 18 wounded there. That's not official yet.
And our earlier report was that there were 19 at Mass General.
That's right.
So a large number of people have been wounded in this. The Boston police at this point are saying 23 injured, 2 dead, but these numbers will change.
And I heard from one of my physician friends up in Boston. He said, I was walking through the Brigham Women's and Hospital coming back from a Red Sox game when they called Code Amber in the hospital. I said, what's that? He said, outside disaster, expect large number of patients.
A disaster plan set up in advance by the hospitals in Boston went into effect immediately after the first explosions, as at least 30, 40 injured persons were taken away from the scene. The blast occurred right there where the large number of people had assembled to watch the racers finish the Boston Marathon on Boylston Street. 2 dead, 23 injured. We are waiting for the Boston Police Department to hold a news conference. We are set up and waiting. We have our camera there, and we will bring that to you the moment it begins. But of course, the Boston police have their hands full now, and the news conference will happen when it happens. We're expecting it at any moment. Here you're seeing many of the people being taken away from the site of the blast. Many people cut. We're hearing that there are a lot of broken bones, as you might imagine. At least some people apparently suffered traumatic amputation of their limbs near the blast site. We've seen men, women, and children being removed from the area. This was immediately after the explosion that was closest to the finish line. You can see a number of people dazed but conscious, bleeding, there at the finish line, as people in this videotape are just trying to figure out what on earth had happened and get to the wounded, which are covered in quite a bit of debris. The windows of that building in the background have been blasted out, of course. The authorities are now telling us that the explosions were bombs hidden in the crowd. Watching the finish of the Boston Marathon, at least one unexploded bomb has been discovered and disarmed by the Boston police. There may have been as many as 2 unexploded bombs that were found in the immediate aftermath of all of this. There is no reason to believe that this is anything larger than an attack on the Boston Marathon, but we are seeing a national security plan going into effect in various places, particularly here in the East. There is tighter security visibly around the White House. The New York Police Department has increased security throughout the city, and David Martin is telling us from the Pentagon that the Air Force is sending aircraft, will be sending aircraft toward Boston to secure the airspace around there. Bob Orr has been talking to his sources in Washington. Bob?
Scott, I think at this point, what is not coming forward is helping investigators maybe with their direction. What I mean by that is they've been looking at their intelligence channels, their threat reporting matrix prior to the event, and also they're monitoring so-called chatter after the event. And a couple of things are missing here. There was nothing in advance that suggested a threat aimed at this date or the Boston Marathon in particular. There was nothing to indicate any kind of planning on the channels that U.S. government officials monitor. And in the aftermath of what now appears to be twin bombings in Boston, there is no chatter claiming responsibility, no chatter suggesting this is connecting to something broader.
Commissioner
Scott?
Davis is going
The governor of Massachusetts, Deval Patrick,
what
live.
we know so far. Mindful that we don't have the whole picture yet, but we have gotten a good deal of information. Commissioner Davis will take all of us through the information that we have, and then I'll come back and talk about some of the things and ways in which we're going to ask people to help us help you this afternoon. So let me turn it over now to Ed Davis, Commissioner of Police here in Boston.
Thank you, Governor. At 2:50 p.m. today, there were simultaneous explosions that occurred along the route of the Boston Marathon near the finish line. These explosions occurred 50 to 100 yards apart, and each scene resulted in multiple casualties. At this point in time, all of the victims have been removed from the scene. We have sent officers to hospitals to be in touch with family members and possible witnesses. We immediately activated a system of response that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the federal government has in place for these type of incidents. My first 2 calls were to the special agent in charge of the FBI and to the colonel of the state police. Both Rick Delorier and Tim Albans immediately sent resources. We have, at this point in time, determined that there has been a 3rd incident that has occurred. There was an explosion that occurred at the JFK library. So this is very much an ongoing event at this point in time. We are not certain that these incidents are related, but we are treating them as if they are. We're recommending to people that they stay home, that if they're in hotels in the area, that they return to their rooms, and that they don't go anyplace and congregate in large crowds. We want to make sure we completely stabilize the situation. We are setting up 2 telephone numbers that are very important. The first one is for families of victims and people who are trying to locate people. That number is 617-635-4500. That is the mayor's hotline. The second number, if anyone saw anything at this incident, if anybody knows of any information that could lead to the arrest and prosecution of the individuals responsible for this, they should call us at 1-800-494-TIPS. That's 1-800-494-TIPS. That line will be staffed up tonight, along with the FBI and the state police. We are working with the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. We have the general here from the Massachusetts National Guard who has assisted in securing the perimeter. And we have additional assets from other agencies who are volunteering to assist us. After this incident occurred, there was certainly a lot of people who were running from the scene. Some of them deposited bags and parcels that they were carrying. Each one of those bags and parcels is being treated as a suspicious device at this point in time. We have multiple EOD teams that are checking each one of these bags. But at this point, we have not found another device. The 3 incidents that have occurred, 2 of them occurred simultaneously on Boylston Street, and the 3rd one occurred at JFK about a half hour ago. People should be calm, but they should understand that this is an ongoing event, and they should understand that we need all the information that we can get available to us. Thank you.
This is Ed Davis, the Commissioner of Police.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the Commissioner.
This is Naval Patrick, the Governor of Massachusetts.
About half an hour ago, who assured us that we would have full cooperation of the FBI, whose SAC is here, and the ATF, who are also on the ground. We have, as the Commissioner said, the State Police, the National Guard, fully deployed, and we thank them for their assistance. The Fire Marshal, the City Fire Marshal is here as well. So a lot of coordination in a very fluid situation. We are asking that people stay out of crowds and calmly make their way home, or if they're visiting, back to their hotels. All of the hotels' security will be prioritized at the outset. Again, if people have information, please use those tip lines. This is very, very important that we get as current information as we can as quickly as possible. Happy to take any questions. Well, you know, the marathon is a pretty special day around here, as you know, and I started this morning visiting Mayor Menino in the hospital, who was devastated that he couldn't be at the marathon today. He's on his way here now, I think. Am I right? From the hospital. So obviously he is as concerned as the rest of us are about the safety of the people who come for this iconic experience here in the city.
Can you address reports that you're looking for a specific kind of truck or a specific kind of person?
No, there is no specific type of truck that we're looking for at this point in time. We are looking for any information that people have as to what they saw or might have heard at the site of the explosion or coming and going. We're investigating all leads right now.
What's the latest death and injury toll?
We don't have the number of casualties at this point in time. This is very early in this investigation. We wanted to get out here and give you as much information as we had, but we cannot tell you exactly how many people have been injured at this point in time.
Heard a third explosion about an hour or so ago. Then there was a rumor that that was a controlled explosion. Do you know what that was?
That was a controlled explosion on Boylston Street, but there was a third explosion at the JFK library that we believe is related.
And Commissioner, had the device that was found, or what's the history of that?
That was not, as I explained earlier, there are a number of parcels that have been dropped by people on the parade route, on the race route. Anything that's out there right now is being viewed as a suspicious device, and we are clearing each one of those items with an EOD team. They may be blowing things up over the course of the next few hours, but at this point in time, we have not found another device on Boylston Street.
Commissioner, have there been any warnings leading up to this, any threats that something like this might happen?
None. We talk about the threat picture all the time as we lead up to this particular event, and we have no information that this was going to happen.
Can you tell us what happened at JFK? Just walk us through.
It's literally just unfolding. I don't have specifics. There was an explosion there. I'm sorry?
Around 3 o'clock there was a fire there, so did this happen after that?
We got reports after 3 o'clock that there was an explosion there.
Commissioner, any injuries at the JFK library?
None that we know of. No.
Is this a terrorist attack right now? President Trump said it was an attack. Did you say this is a terrorist attack?
We're not being definitive on this right now, but you can reach your own conclusions based upon what happened.
Could you describe the diligence that's been paid to those? Police trying to claim responsibility?
At this point in time, no. Every asset of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the federal government is either here or coming here. As the governor said, the president has talked directly to the mayor as well as the governor, and I had a personal conversation with the director of the FBI who pledged acknowledged any help that we needed. So we are stabilizing the situation at this point in time, but people should be cautious. That's all. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
And so you've just been watching a news conference live with the governor of Massachusetts, Deval Patrick, and Ed Davis, the commissioner of police in Boston. One of the things that we learned in that news conference was that there was a third bombing at roughly the same time at the John F. Kennedy Library in Boston, but a spokesman for the library says that there were no injuries there. So a third bombing at the JFK Library in Boston, but a spokesman for the library says no injuries there. There are apparently 4 bombs in all. 2 of them detonated near the finish line of the Boston Marathon. 1 detonated at the John F. Kennedy Library. A 4th device did not detonate. It was discovered by police and has been defused at this point in time. Before the news conference, Boston police were telling us officially that there were 2 dead and 23 wounded, but during the news conference you just heard, they indicated that they did not have a solid count on the casualties. Those numbers will change as we continue to learn more. So, if you are just joining us, to catch you up on what has been happening in Boston this afternoon, a little bit before 3 o'clock, about 2:50, 2 bombs exploded near the finish line of the Boston Marathon. That is the aftermath of the first explosion, and you will see the smoke from the second explosion as the camera pans left, and there it is there. It looks to be about a block away. 2 explosions in the crowd. There's a still shot of the second explosion that you saw, the one that was down the street. These are apparently both on the sidewalk, which was jammed with thousands of people along the route of the marathon, cheering the runners on. This is one of the explosions. We'll put it on a loop for you. There it is, behind that blue fence. Hundreds, thousands of spectators. You can see the runner in the middle of the road go down just because of the concussive force of the blast. Again, Boston police telling us 2 dead, 23 wounded, but those numbers tend to be changing. John LaPook has been talking to sources at 2 of the major hospitals that have been receiving the wounded. John, what numbers are they giving you?
So Tom Langford, who's the senior media relations specialist at Brigham and Women's Hospital, said 18 to 20 patients, 2 are critical. And then we heard earlier at Mass General, there were, I believe, 19 and 6 were critical.
So a number of people in critical condition. We have seen people in the videotape and in the photographs who've apparently suffered traumatic amputation of their limbs. The Boston police at last count had told us that 2 are dead, but as John LaPook just reported, many are in critical condition at Boston's best hospitals. Bob Orr is in Washington. He has been talking to his sources in law enforcement. And Bob, can you just bring us up to date, please, on what you've been able to learn?
Scott, we were told that there were 2 devices that did explode. They had been put in trash cans or garbage containers near the race route, an area obviously congested with people. If you were targeting a crowd, it's the kind of place that you could secretly drop a bag carrying an explosive device and do quite a bit of damage. We were also told that one of the devices that was found that had not exploded is intact, and police have a pretty good look at that. That will help them perhaps kind of unravel or decode how it was put together. But we now believe there may have been 2 unexploded devices that were recovered. There's a little bit of confusion about what the police folks there in Boston said about this explosion at JFK Library. We were told a while ago that this may have been more like a Molotov cocktail, like an incendiary device and not a bomb. So that's still a little fuzzy, but the authorities there say they're looking at that as possibly connected. So, of course, we have to look at that way as well. And finally, the most important thing is what police are not finding, and that is when they go to the intelligence reporting stream, they're not seeing any claims of responsibility, and more than that, they're not seeing anything in advance of this event today pointing to today as a target or to Boston and the marathon there as a specific target. All of that working backwards argues for the possibility that this is not a part of a large cell, but possibly the work of a very small group or even a lone wolf. Secrets in planning are difficult. Conspiracies are difficult. And when you have something that's completely off the radar, like this appears to be, Scott, one of the things you have to consider is it might be the work of a single individual or maybe just a couple. But this is in the early stages. They're trying to round up people in the area that may have seen suspicious people in the area. We were told there's at least a surveillance photo of one man carrying what looked to be backpacks in advance of the bombing. So this is all still very fluid and in the early hours as the federal agents move into Boston with local police there and try to figure this out. Scott.
Bob, thank you very much. And as you say, the reporting is very fluid. In the news conference with the police commissioner a moment ago, they indicated that a bomb had exploded at the John F. Kennedy Library. But we are also being told at this hour from the library people that there was a fire in a mechanical room there that was just at the same time as the twin bombs at the Boston Marathon. So it may turn out that the JFK library information, as we look at it and learn more about it, is that it was an accidental fire there at the JFK library just at the same moment that these bombs exploded. But these are the kinds of things that we're going to learn more about as more information becomes available. We do know from the spokeswoman at the JFK library that no one was injured there, whether it was an explosion or just a mechanical fire in the mechanical room there at the JFK library. We do not know. The police say it was an explosion. People at the library are telling us that they just suffered a fire at the same moment that the Boston Marathon was bombed. John LaPook has been talking with people at the hospitals that are receiving the largest number of wounded. And John, what can you give us on the new numbers?
They keep coming in and changing. Now from Tufts Medical Center, there are 9 people there. So if you look at what we know from the 3 major medical centers, we've heard from, there are around 50 people, 19 at Mass General, there are 18 to 20 at the Brigham, and now 9 at Tufts.
Around 50 wounded being treated at the hospitals.
Number of them critical.
Some of them, quite a few of them, maybe a dozen or so in critical condition, but others, of course, not so critical in their condition in terms of having lacerations and broken bones. There'll be many survivors from all of this. The Boston police have told us that there are 2 dead that they have confirmed so far. John Miller, our senior correspondent, former assistant director of the FBI, is with us. And John, what have you been learning?
Well, they're looking very hard at that piece of closed-circuit television security camera video. They've got an individual who they're interested in because he's carrying 2 backpacks. Now, you know how early it is, and you know how information will shift and change, and that's an important caveat. But when you have 2 devices possibly contained in backpacks, and you have an image of somebody moving before that, carrying 2 backpacks, that could be someone who's got his backpack and one he's carrying for another runner, or that could be a suspect. So what they're doing now between the FBI and the Boston Police Department is they're looking at his direction of travel. The shot that they have of him is not really identifiable. It's from behind. So they're scoping out the network of CCTV cameras, trying to figure out from the direction he's coming from, what other cameras would he have passed? Can they identify the same individual, this time from the front and with a face? And then based on that look and whatever other cameras they can see from the rest of his trip, can they stitch together where he came from, where he went? Did he place these packages? And is he a person of interest? That would be an extraordinarily big break to have a picture of the person carrying the bombs. Or it could be one of those leads you run out and find out it goes nowhere. But it's something that they're dealing with now.
But they've already found videotape from surveillance cameras that they find of interest.
And this is part of the post-blast response protocol, if you will, which is where did it happen? Where's the available video? And that critical available video from the moments immediately preceding it, when the device might have been placed, and where you can see somebody maybe put it down and maybe walk away.
We have Jonathan Elias, who is a correspondent for our station WBZ in Boston. Jonathan, I understand you were there when it happened. Can you tell us what you saw?
Scott, we were 30 feet away from when this blast went off. We were standing at the finish line. It was a photographer, producer, and myself. Everybody was in a great mood, great race. The weather was perfect. And all of a sudden, I remember I pulled out my camera on my phone, and I told our photographer, hey, smile. I took a picture. And as soon as he turned back around to face the finish line, this explosion went off 30 feet. And when I say 30 feet, I mean it was like right across the street, that kind of direction. Big plume of smoke. Clearly, whatever went off was sitting on the sidewalk because the smoke went straight up. It didn't come out from the buildings. Glass was shattered in 4 or 5 buildings right next to each other. We ran toward the direction because we weren't sure at first what happened. And then a second explosion 2 blocks up went off, and that's when we started running towards where the first bombing happened. Everybody at that point was running past us to get out. The officials for the race, they were about 6 to 7 blocks up. They were stopping the race and telling the runners go away. In fact, people were running into the runners to get away from this part of town. And then when we got over to the sidewalk, it was horrific. There were people lying on the ground. Nobody was screaming. Nobody was crying. It's almost like their eyes were open and nobody was there. They were completely checked out in shock. People had been blown apart in some cases. I don't mean to get too horrific, but the scene was absolutely horrific. And our photographer was helping tear down the barrier so that paramedics and emergency personnel could get to them and try and help them. And not more than a block and a half away, there's a triage tent, and that's just to take care of some of the runners that come in that maybe have some strains or shortness of breath. But everybody came running out of that tent with wheelchairs and gurneys, and they were picking up the wounded. They were getting them into the tent. They were trying to maintain or try and sustain them before they could take an ambulance ride to the hospital. But keep in mind, all this is happening at the same time that everybody doesn't know when another device might go off. So in fact, the police had to come through the triage tent and do a sweep while they were working on some of the wounded. And the ambulances came in, the police shut down. This is the heart of Boston. The Copley Center here, this is the heart of Boston. This is all shut down now. No traffic in or out. Our governor just got on the air and told people, listen, if you were thinking about going out, don't. Stay home. If you're in a hotel, go back to your room. And just to give you some perspective on this as well, Scott, let me just show you. So on the sidewalk here, this is the runners would be running down the street. The bomb went off on this sidewalk, and not more than maybe 15, 20 feet away, you know, that's the street. Those were the runners coming past the bombing. So at this point, we can't account for who was hit. Were some of the runners hit, or was it just the spectators that were sitting on the sidewalk? I guess if there's any silver lining in any of this, that sidewalk, probably an hour earlier, was absolutely packed 10 deep. But because we were in the 4th hour of the second wave of racers, we'd already seen the finishes by the men and the women. Basically, it had thinned out. Had that happened an hour, maybe 2 hours early, the numbers we'd be looking at, 2 dead, 23 wounded, would be a lot greater than that. But there really isn't any silver lining here right now, as the investigation, as you know, Scott, you just heard John talking about, is just in this very initial stage.
Jonathan, one of the bombs exploded very near the finish line. Can you paint that picture for us of who was there and what is there?
Okay, so if my back is to the grandstands, this is just on Boylston, which is across from me. Our back literally was to the grandstand. The finish line would have been right where that guy is standing right there, and people were running across the line. And I got to tell you, for especially marathon runners, they were jubilant. They were coming across and raising their hands in the air, so ecstatic that they had finished this 26-plus mile race. So everybody's in a good mood, and this is where we were standing. The grandstand behind me, the finish line here, and just across the street, kind of the same distance with this street here, you had spectators lining it with signs and looking for their loved ones that are coming across the finish line, cheering them on for that final leg there. And that's when it happened. The bomb literally went off across the street. And at first, a lot of people were kind of sitting around saying, wait, what just happened? You know, our infrastructure here in Boston's old. Perhaps maybe it was a manhole cover that blew. But then a second later, there was a second bomb that went off 2 blocks away. And that's when everybody got the picture loud and clear. People were sprinting past us, and all of the emergency personnel were running towards it. And it was just absolutely chaotic in that final minute. And I will say this. The police here in Boston, they reacted so professionally. And in those first few minutes, I even heard officers yelling as they're running to help those that were wounded. They were yelling, this is a crime scene. Be careful. Let's secure this area. It is a crime scene. So they were already working in conjunction with not only helping the wounded, but understanding that this was a crime scene and they needed to preserve whatever they could find at that location.
And Jonathan, the first explosion occurred at the finish line there, as you just described. The second explosion was a block or 2 away. What was in that location?
Well, again, and I wish I could spell it. It's not as clear, but let's just say this street right here. This is just St. James Street. This goes back away. Boylston is a big 4-lane kind of wide street, and that is the finishing straightaway for the marathon. And coming down that street, it's I got to say maybe 3/4 of a mile, maybe a mile straightaway. And when you come down that area, that's what it was. It was all the track. That was where all the runners were. So 2 blocks up from the finish line, again, spectators line both sides of the street. They are packed in there. But again, it had thinned out a little from the spectator standpoint, but you still had a lot of runners on the track. And this bomb clearly affected the runners because it knocked people onto the ground. I guess the only thing we didn't see, let me just check with Chris, we didn't see anybody on this side of the fences. So that would have been the runners. We saw everybody, all the victims were on the sidewalk. So at this point, it looks as though most of the spectators were the ones that were impacted by the blasts.
Jonathan Elias of our station WBZ in Boston. Jonathan, thank you very much. We're looking at new videotape coming in. This occurred just shy of 3 o'clock. It was about 2:50 Eastern Time when the Boston Marathon was attacked today by 2 bombs that exploded, one near the finish line, one a couple of blocks from the finish line. At least 2 people have been killed. Many have been wounded. We understand there's something on the order of 50 people who are being treated at the Boston hospitals. Some of them are in critical condition. That you see there is the second explosion. The first explosion near the finish line occurred just before 3 o'clock, and then the second explosion followed. This is a still photograph of the second explosion. This followed by only about 15 seconds or so. That is right where the spectators are. Thousands of people lined this route, cheering on the runners. This is the explosion near the finish line. Right there, it's a very short piece of videotape. That's behind the blue fence is where all the spectators are. You see the runner in the middle of the frame falling down to the street just from the concussive force of the blast that occurred there. The police have now confirmed for us that there were 2 bombs that were detonated at the Boston Marathon. A third device was found nearby, unexploded, and the Boston bomb squad defused that. In the news conference that occurred just a few minutes ago, the Boston police said that there had been another explosion at the JFK Library in Boston. However, we're now getting more information on that. The library has said that it actually suffered a fire, an accident, in its mechanical room there, and that no one was injured in that accident. So we have those conflicting reports at this hour from the library. The police said that there was a bomb there. People at the library have said they just had an accidental fire, which just happened to occur at almost precisely the same moment that the Boston Marathon was attacked. John Miller, our senior correspondent, former assistant director of the FBI, give us a sense, you know this like almost no other, what's happening at the FBI, at the federal level? How are they mounting this investigation now?
Well, the first thing that will happen is from SIOC, which is the command center at FBI headquarters in the heart of the J. Edgar Hoover building. They will send out several bureau-wide instructions to all 56 field offices. The first one will be everybody in every field intelligence group, go over all your human intelligence and look for anything that might be relevant to this. The second thing they'll do is, if it's not in the reporting, go find out if it exists out there somewhere else. And that means across 56 field offices, if you are a human intelligence source of the FBI on terrorism, you're going to be getting a call or a visit from your handler agent right now. And they're going to be saying, what do you know? What have you heard? What can you find out? That's the human piece of this. The electronic piece of this will be just as significant. They're on the phone right now with the National Security Agency, the CIA, and the Defense Intelligence Agency saying, go over every single wire that was recorded over the first 48 hours going backwards from this. Listen live to everything you can in the 24 hours going forward through this, and then go backwards from that if you have to. But what they're going to be looking for is, was there some coded communication from some known terrorist group that would give them a sign here? Now, I say that all in the context, Scott, that it is always possible, as we learned in Oklahoma City, that while the focus is on international terrorism, it could be a domestic incident, the work of a lone wolf, and so on. But they're not going to wait for that to settle. They're going to really throw out a dragnet for information, start pulling it in, and doing some very intensive analysis while they look for evidence.
Bob Orr was reporting from Washington earlier that there is, at least at this point, no credible claim of responsibility for this twin bombing in Boston. We've been watching this videotape of the immediate aftermath of that explosion near the finish line, and I wonder if in just a moment we might be able to take that back to its very beginning and just listen in to what has happened. This is one of the first tapes that we've received in the newsroom that actually has audio on it to give us a sense of what was going on in those first moments. And so if we could take that tape back to its beginning, perhaps we could get a sense.
There's gotta be people hurt out there.
We've had an attack. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God.
This was the scene just before 3 o'clock Eastern Time when 2 bombs struck near the finish line of the Boston Marathon. This is unedited videotape. Boston police have confirmed that 2 are dead, at least. And we have confirmed with the various hospital emergency rooms that there is something on the order of 50 people who have been injured. Some of them are in critical condition. Here you see some people who were near the blast, wounded but conscious, in shock. One reporter described an eerie sound of silence. Perhaps not what you would expect, but he said the people were so dazed by the explosion that for a long time, even the seriously injured did not realize what had happened to them. We have seen some evidence of traumatic amputation of limbs in the videotape that we've brought into the newsroom. Many people in critical condition. The mayor of Boston is expected to hold a news conference live in the next few minutes, and as soon as he comes to the podium, we will switch you there directly to get new information. What we do know at this point is that at least 2 bombs exploded at the Boston Marathon today. A 3rd bomb was discovered and disarmed by the Boston police after the first 2 went off. In a news conference, that's a picture of the 2nd explosion you see there in the distance, the smoke rising, the smoke in the foreground and then the smoke rising about 2 blocks away. The 2 bombs went off about 15 seconds, one after the other. In a news conference that we heard a short while ago, Boston police said that there was another explosion at the JFK library. This is a confused situation. It happened about the same time, but people at the library believe that there is reason to believe that it was an accident, that there was some kind of a fire in a mechanical room. The one thing that we do know about the JFK library is that there are no injuries reported there. The library has confirmed to us that they have no injuries there. Whether it was a simultaneous accident or whether it was another explosive device, we do not know and may find out from the mayor here as he speaks to us shortly. John LaPook has been talking with various emergency rooms in the area. And John, I wonder if you give us some sense of how many people are being treated, how serious their wounds are, and what kind of things they're suffering from.
Well, we have 3 hospitals. We have the Mass General that has 19 patients, and 6 of them are in critical condition. And then we have the Brigham, which has anywhere from 18 to 20. Tufts has 9. I just spoke to a friend of mine at another hospital. They're all rolling into their contingency plans where they're ready for other people to come. I don't know how many people are actually going to get it, but it's very impressive. We heard about how prepared the police were. The hospitals have these plans. We heard about the Amber Plan at the Brigham, and they're just ready to roll this out. They rehearse it.
John Miller, our senior correspondent, former assistant director of the FBI. This is terrorism, it would seem. We don't know if it's domestic, as in the case of Oklahoma City, or whether it's a foreign-inspired plot.
So when you look at this, you have to consider what did it take to put this together. I mean, some of the basic indicators are multiple devices placed at a high-profile event where there was a good deal of security to start with. What we're seeing when you look at those pictures of the devices going off is you're seeing you see a big flash, an explosion, a lot of white smoke, which a bomb tech might tell you could be indicative of a low explosive as opposed to a high explosive. You're seeing devastating injuries to lower extremities, which is indicative, as we saw in the 7/7 blasts in the subways in London, of a backpack-type device that's placed on the ground, or a device that's placed in a trash can low to the ground, where that blast goes out in an open-air environment and hits people. But the key here is the fact that somebody was able to carry these devices in, place them, and time them to go off within 15 seconds of each other, and that there may, as we're being told, have been a third device. So a lot of thought went into this. When you look at where does this kind of planning art come from, all you have to do is go back to the latest issue of Inspire magazine, which is the magazine published by Al-Qaeda of the Arabian Peninsula. And what they were calling for in that issue was, rather than rely on the front office of a terrorist organization, they were inspiring, if you will, true to their name, followers around the globe, but particularly in the United States, to learn the recipes for explosives from the magazine, learn the elements of the plot, and to target things on their own. When we talk to Bob Orr and we hear there were no intelligence reports of a heightened threat, there were no specific warnings, and there's been no claim of responsibility, those are more indicators that point towards, and remember, this is all very early, a domestically put together plot, the so-called lone wolf, or maybe 2 people acting together, where the only ones they're communicating with is either themselves or the other person in the group. And that's just the kind of plot that is likely to fly under the intelligence dragnet's radar, because it's not communicating with the front office of a terrorist group or doing any of the other things that would make it pop up on the radar. So that is one of the first things they'll look at in the absence of other information, that it's something closer to home.
Thank you, John. We do not know, of course, whether this act of terrorism was inspired overseas or right here in the United States. We do not have any information about suspects that the police may have with regard to this attack on the Boston Marathon, but what is quite clear is that 2 bombs were placed where they would do the most harm, where they would strike innocent men, women, and children who were jammed near the finish line to watch the end of the Boston Marathon today. We have a new piece of videotape. I am told that what you want to watch for is the sound of the bomb in this videotape. It's very brief, but apparently it was captured, and we'll play that for you now.
Whoa! Something just blew up at... Run! Go!
That would have been a second blast. You heard the woman say something just blew up, and then 15 seconds later we know a second bomb went off, so that would have been the second blast that you heard in that videotape. Let's listen to that one more time.
Whoa! Something just blew up at... Run!
The second detonation at the Boston Marathon. That was just before 3 o'clock today, Eastern Time. 2 bombs exploded. At least 2 people have been killed. Something on the order of 50 people are being treated at various hospitals. Many of them are in critical condition, some not so seriously wounded. John LaPook has been talking to the hospitals. John, what do you know now?
Yeah, I just got another new piece of information from Boston Children. We have 4 patients ranging from good to serious. No fatalities there. No more coming in, but they'll be taking the overflow from the Brigham, where there are 18 to 20, and 2 are critical there. At Tufts, there are 9 patients. None of them we don't know the status of them. And at Mass General, 22 confirmed, 6 critical, 2 serious. The rest are being evaluated. We know that the injuries range from anything from superficial cuts from the glass or whatever to we know at least one person with a ruptured eardrum. We saw at the very beginning of that blast, everybody covered their ear, and we saw the concussion, the concussive blast knock down at least 2 people. So we can expect there to be more problems with people's hearing and ruptured eardrums, to all the way to a severed limb that we know that there was one eyewitness about, and then, of course, more serious than that.
John, thank you. Major Garrett is at the White House for us. He's been following events there. The president was informed earlier today. Major, what do you know now?
Well, Scott, we've been told by a White House official that later on this afternoon, not too long ago, the president received separate briefings from the FBI Director Robert Mueller and the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano. The White House has just released a still photograph taken here at the White House, not of either of those 2 briefings, but of a phone call the president placed earlier, just after being informed of the explosions in Boston. That's a phone call he placed to the FBI Director Robert Mueller. The White House says the president is receiving regular updates on this, but the briefing from Robert Mueller and Janet Napolitano, the Secretary of Homeland Security, the most recent information we've received from the White House specifically about who is informing the president. And for the first time, Scott, the White House describes this as an active investigation. It doesn't call it an active terrorist investigation, an active criminal investigation, but quite obviously, based on everything that we are reporting, it is an active investigation. The White House now calls it that for the very first time. And one other note, Scott, it's important to suggest or to let our viewers know that there was no crisis atmosphere here that derailed the president's schedule. At 4:30, he was to have a very typical ambassadorial credentialing ceremony in the Oval Office of the White House. That had happened at exactly 4:30, according to White House officials. So the president did not completely disrupt his schedule this afternoon. He received regular briefings, the most recent one we've been informed of, from the FBI Director and the Secretary of Homeland Security.
Major Garrett at the White House. Major, thank you very much. Eric Shapiro in the control room. Eric, I'm going to ask you to cue up that videotape that you were just showing as we were listening to Major Garrett. This is the tape of the victims down on the sidewalk in the immediate aftermath of one of the explosions. I'd like to go back to that videotape here in just a moment. Let's listen in to what's happening in the immediate aftermath of the explosion. Just before 3 o'clock at the finish line of the Boston Marathon, 2 bombs exploded in the crowd. At least 2 people dead, although that number, sadly, is likely to change as we learn more. Something on the order of 50 people in the hospital being treated for a variety of wounds, some of them in critical condition. We have a number of photographs of the bombs actually exploding. This is, of course, a very well-covered event. This is the finish line of one of the greatest races in the world. And so there were many cameras there. One photograph is a still photograph. Oh, well, let's look at this one first. This is near the finish line. This is the actual blast itself. There it goes. Behind that blue fence, hundreds, probably thousands of spectators. You see from the concussive force this runner in the middle of the road falling down. get a sense of how powerful that was, and to go off in a place that was packed that way. So many people injured, at least 2 killed. This is the second explosion. This is still photograph of the second explosion. These are runners at the end of 26 miles at this point, with the finish line down the road. You can see it with the finish line in sight. This is the second explosion, which occurred about 15 seconds after the first one. And finally, we have these images of both explosions that were caught on videotape. That's the first one, the smoke clearing from the first explosion. And as you watch down the street, the camera will pan left again. You'll see the smoke from the second explosion, and there it is. The sound of the second explosion was captured in a short clip of videotape, and we'll play that for you now.
Whoa! Something just blew up at...
You could hear the woman say that something just exploded, and then you hear that second explosion. Boston police have told us that there were at least 3 bombs. 2 of them exploded. A third bomb was discovered by the police and was defused. There has been some confusion about an event at the JFK Library in Boston, which had occurred at the same time, right about 3 o'clock. In the news conference we heard a short while ago, the Boston police were saying that they thought another bomb had exploded at the library. But there is now an indication from the library and from officials that the library simply suffered some kind of an accidental fire at the same moment, and the library people have confirmed to us that no one was hurt at the JFK Library. This appears to be an event centered on the Boston Marathon. There's no indication that there is a wider plot afoot. Nothing else that we know of has happened anywhere else in the country, although standard security protocols have gone into effect. There's more security at the White House. The New York Police Department has ramped up security all over the city. And David Martin tells us from the Pentagon that the Air Force is planning on sending aircraft to secure the airspace around Boston. We have new video coming in right now of the first explosion, this one near the finish line. Let's have a look and see what this is. Oh my. And that was the second explosion you heard right there. This is video that we have received from the Boston Globe newspaper. Let's listen. We're going to go back to the beginning of this videotape. This is the first time that we have seen this, and here it is again. That's the second explosion, about 2 blocks away. It was about 10 minutes before 3 Eastern Time.
We've had an attack.
Boston Marathon was in its 4th hour. Many of the best runners had already crossed the finish line. Many hundreds were still coming up the road right here at Boylston Street. First explosion was followed by a second one about 2 blocks away, also in the crowd.
Oh my God.
We do not know who did this or why, but the bombs were clearly set to kill and maim as many innocent people as possible.
Oh my God.
Both bombs were placed in the thick of the crowd as people cheered on the racers at the conclusion of the Boston Marathon today. We are expecting a news conference any moment from the mayor of Boston. We'll have new information from the mayor shortly, and as soon as that news conference begins, we will switch you there. There's been a lot of conflicting information over the last 2.5 hours, as there always is in situations like this. But here is what we are most confident in right now. Clearly, 2 explosions, 2 bombs. A third bomb was found in the vicinity of the Boston Marathon route, and it was defused by the Boston police. Now, there was a third explosion at the John F. Kennedy Library at about the same time, but now we are being told that was not a bomb. The police news conference that was held a while ago suggested that there was a bomb at the JFK Library. We are being told now that there was a fire in a mechanical room at the library, just happened to be at the same time that these bombs went off. And we are told by the folks at the JFK Library that no one was injured there. But we do know from the Boston police that at least 2 people have been killed. That number will likely grow as we learn more. And at least 50 people are in various emergency rooms in Boston.
Oh my God, they're dead.
Many of them are in critical condition. Most of them have survivable injuries. A great deal of trauma, broken bones, bleeding, a major concern. These pictures were shot about 2.5 hours ago, immediately after the bombing, but we are told that now the scene is completely clear. The entire area, this part, the heart of Boston, is a crime scene. And federal agents, state agents, local police will be combing through every inch of these blocks, looking for any type of a fragment of a bomb that they can use in order to find the perpetrators of this terrible event. John LaPook has been keeping up with the casualties in the hospitals around Boston. John, bring us back up to date, if you would, on the numbers and the types of injuries that are being treated.
All right, well, the types of injuries range everywhere from cuts to, we heard an eyewitness report of an amputation. I know of at least one person who has a ruptured eardrum. They sound less serious, but with that concussive force, I'm sure there are going to be more injuries like that. And of course, with the deaths, we know that there are going to be a lot more serious things happening in the future. There are, at the Mass General, we have 19 people there. At the Brigham, 18 to 20. At Tufts, 9. And then 5 at another hospital. So we're talking about the mid-50s right now. And I have a report from Tufts. As a precaution, the Boston Police Department has temporarily evacuated the emergency department. Patients have been safely moved. The rest of the hospital is open as normal. As soon as we'll be able to move the patients back to the emergency department, we will let you know.
No information on exactly why they took that action?
No, some sort of precaution.
We have a photograph now, an official photograph from the White House of the president as he was notified of this act of terrorism in Boston. This is the president talking, we understand, to the FBI director, Director Mueller. We could presume that Director Mueller at this moment is in his command post there at the FBI headquarters. There is a very large and elaborate command center set up for the FBI to deal with exactly the kind of event that we have seen happen today. An act of terrorism by whom we do not know, but 2 bombs targeting the Boston Marathon. It was a short while ago that we received the first videotape of the first bomb exploding near the finish line, a videotape that also captured the second explosion. You see Boylston Street there. You see the finish line. The first bomb was right next to it, and here is that bomb exploding. And that was the sound of the second bomb. about 2 blocks away. This video has come to us courtesy of the Boston Globe. Northern Command, the part of the Pentagon that covers the United States, was thinking of flying combat aircraft over Boston to make sure that the airspace there was secure, but we are told now that Northern Command has decided to stand that down, so they are not sending the aircraft at this point. Apparently some indication then that the Pentagon and our national intelligence community believes that there is not a threat from the air of any kind. No reason to believe that there would be. It was just a precaution that they were planning, but have now decided to stand down.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God.
One voice said, "Oh my God, they're dead," right?
Oh my God.
A number of witnesses have told us that they saw people who they believed had been killed. The Boston Police Department has said 2 are dead, but we do expect to hear more from the mayor of Boston, who will be having a news conference shortly. I want to recap and correct some information that we heard earlier one more time in a news conference with the Boston Police about an hour ago. They suggested that there had been another bombing at the JFK Museum quite some distance away, and we now understand that that was a fire, an accident that occurred at the library in a mechanical room about the same time that these bombs went off. So there was confusion about that, as there would be. The library tells us that no one was hurt. So now we know there's no indication of a terrorist attack at the library. This appears to be centered on the Boston Marathon. 3 bombs at least. 2 of them exploded. The Boston police are telling us that a 3rd bomb was discovered and defused, and they now apparently have that intact, which will be a wealth of evidence for the ongoing investigation. The president is going to brief reporters at the White House at about 10 minutes after 6 Eastern Time, and of course we will bring that to you live when the president has an opportunity to come out. Those times are likely to slip because this is an emergency situation and things are changing all the time. John Miller, our senior correspondent and former assistant director of the FBI, has been talking to his sources. John, what are you hearing now?
More of the same, Scott, just that they're putting together this operation out of the Boston field office of the FBI. They're coordinating that with headquarters, and they're really sending that out in ripples through the entire intelligence community. You've got 16 intelligence agencies that have just come to a near full stop today in terms of this incident, and told, comb through what you've been seeing and hearing and look for anything that relates to attribution here. Are we dealing with a domestic incident? Are we dealing with a lone wolf? Are we dealing with something inspired from a terrorist group overseas, or actually operated from overseas? And right now that's coming together slowly.
No indication yet on who did this, whether it was a foreign terrorist plot or a domestic terrorist plot.
No, but you can see by the construct of this plot, at least 2, and it appears now probably 3 devices set to go off almost simultaneously at a globally covered and televised event, that this has all of the hallmarks of somebody who sat down and planned this out for maximum effect.
It was designed to get attention.
It was designed to get exactly the kind of attention we're seeing now. That's step 1. But as Bob Orr has pointed out, our national security correspondent down in Washington, part of getting the maximum effect of attention is the theory of terrorism is that it is theater. It is meant to put on a spectacle. It is meant to garner lots of attention. It is meant to contain drama, a terrible kind of theater meant to inspire fear. But the other part of that is it has to come with that second piece, which is why are you doing this? Who are you and why are you doing this? And what we haven't seen now is the carefully planned claim of responsibility that would have come on videotape or in a martyrdom video or in some other video from a foreign terrorist organization. What we also haven't seen yet, and I'm sure we will in some time, are the predictable false claims of responsibilities on the parts of groups that had nothing to do with it. That's why really the intelligence community has gone into overdrive to try and figure out what they either can see in the intelligence that's come over the transom in recent days or what they can squeeze out of their human and signal sources now.
We are expecting a news conference from the mayor of Boston at any time. We are expecting to see the president at the White House at about 10 minutes after 6 Eastern Time to tell us a little bit more about the federal response and what the president may have been told up at this point in time. If you were just joining us, there has been a terrorist attack in Boston at the Boston Marathon. 2 bombs were placed in the crowds designed to wreak maximum death and maiming of innocent people. We have a number of videotapes of the explosions because, of course, this is a very heavily covered event. That's the second bomb you see about 2 blocks down from the first explosion. They blew up about 15 seconds apart. This is a still photograph of the second bomb exploding, and you get a sense of where both of these devices were placed. They were in the crowd on both sides of the street. Thousands of people were cheering the runners on. You see the runners there in the middle of the street. They're running toward the finish line. They're 26 miles into this. And so thousands of people, both sides of the street, cheering the runners on when the explosions occurred. This is a little bit of an aerial view of Boylston Street. Down at the bottom of the frame is the finish line. You see where the first explosion was. The second explosion, about 15 seconds later, occurred up the street. 2 bombs there that exploded. The police say that there was a third bomb that they discovered. This is the explosion of the first bomb. Now listen for the second one. And there is the second explosion. Let's listen for just a moment. At least 2 people have been killed, but that was an early report from the Boston Police Department, and unfortunately in these kinds of things that number is likely to grow. More than 50 people are reported in various emergency rooms in the area. Many of them are in critical condition. There has been some traumatic amputation of limbs on the part of some of the people in the crowd. Other people have been wounded, but not as gravely.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
We were just talking to John Miller about some of the possibilities regarding foreign terrorists, and our Bob Orr has been talking with his sources about the possibility of domestic terrorism. He's in our Washington bureau now. Bob?
Scott, we have to say at the outset, we have no idea who's behind this. The list of suspects is open-ended. It could be al-Qaeda, it could be someone influenced from or by al-Qaeda, or it could be a domestic lone wolf or a domestic group. One thing I want to raise here is we have to take a look at the calendar. Today is April 15th. Most of us know that as Tax Day. It's also called Patriots Day, but it's the beginning of the 3rd week of April. And I raise this, and I'd be interested to see what John thinks about this. I raise this because in the past, if you look at our history, it has been a troubled week in this country in terms of extremists, both on the left and on the right. The biggest events have happened with right-wing domestic extremists. The Waco siege, for example, in Waco, Texas, came down in a fiery end on April 18th and 19th. Oklahoma City, the bombing by McVeigh and Nichols happened on April 19th, the same date in 1995. I'm not saying that those things have anything to do with this, but over the years, frankly, this has been a week that's sometimes unnerved law enforcement because there are sympathizers and there are radicals who, in some twisted way, sometimes think about commemorating those kinds of awful events. So this is a wide open field of potential suspects, ranging on the one hand from some kind of domestic group to maybe just one aggrieved individual who had time to make devices and distribute them. We've assumed that this may be some kind of a small cell plot because these devices went off sequentially. But that's presuming that all the timers were precise, and the timing of the blast, Scott, we don't know, may have been even in some ways coincidental. So these are the kinds of things investigators have on the table in front of them at the command centers at the FBI and at the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Bureau as they try to figure out where this might go. Scott.
And Bob, you told us a couple of hours ago that there was no credible claim of responsibility. Is that still the case as you know it?
It's still the case, and that's important. I mean, not only no credible claim coming behind the event, but also there is a notable lack of chatter in the intel world. That's people talking about this who might have some kind of nefarious background or intent. So that's kind of interesting. Whoever is behind this, whoever planned it, apparently did it off the radar. That argues in one sense, perhaps for a lone wolf, somebody who got an idea maybe out of Inspired magazine, or someone who just had their own grievance and went to the internet and learned how to build a bomb. Or it might be a model where there is someone who had some help. And I think in this term, Scott, of the thwarted attempt or the failed attempt in Times Square a few years ago, where Faisal Shahzad, a man that was trained by the Pakistani Taliban, drove a SUV loaded with explosives into Times Square only because it was a poorly constructed bomb. Did that not cause a great deal of carnage? That's a case where Shahzad, in the one sense, was a lone wolf, but he had help, guidance, and training from a bona fide terrorist organization. If you look at the international specter, just as we kind of wrap up the possible scenarios here, the most recent attempts from al-Qaeda have come from a group in Yemen, al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, and they have been on a much grander scale. They tried in 2009 on Christmas Day to bring down an airplane with the so-called underwear bomb, and then the following August they tried to bring down a couple of cargo planes with bombs hidden inside printers. So any of these groups and or people could be suspects, and right now, frankly, I think the authorities don't have a great deal to go on. John?
Bob, one of the things that you look for in these things is that claim of responsibility. Have we heard any claims that have been floating out there yet, and whether or not they're deemed credible or not?
No. As we've been discussing for a while, there's nothing so far that's come over the transom that they've even looked twice at. I mean, the intel guys have been on this, as you know better than almost any of us. They've been on this since this happened at about 2:50 this afternoon. They've taken a look at what's happened since the event. They went back and re-scrubbed the threads leading up to the event, and they just don't see any markers, nothing that points them in any one particular direction. So again, the absence of two things: the absence of intel or even kind of a quasi-specific threat on the front side, the absence of a credible claim on the backside. Seems to argue for something either very closely held, and you know conspiracies and secrets are hard, or it argues for someone who perhaps acted by themselves or with one partner, something like that.
And it certainly goes towards that model which al-Qaeda has been advocating in their communications, which is to inspire the lone wolves. But let's go to Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick in a press conference now.
Meet at the usual meetup place because the race was cut short. We'll be in a position to announce that, we hope, very shortly, so that people can find some assistance to help people find their loved ones. But I really am grateful that all of the federal, state, and local law enforcement officials are coordinating so closely and so well. They are talking constantly. They are all in investigation mode right now. It's a very serious time, so we do need people to stay out of the area of the explosion for the time being.
Mayor,
Governor Deval Patrick of Massachusetts reiterating a request by police for people to stay out of the area as police do what they earlier told us is to try to stabilize the area where they're trying to clear many suspicious packages, mostly innocent material that people just dropped and ran away from after the explosions, but things that are backpacks and other things that need to be checked out nonetheless. Dr. John LaPook has been following the situation at emergency rooms around the greater Boston area. Do we have an update on casualties, injuries, new numbers?
Yeah, and John, the numbers are at least starting to stabilize for this first wave. Now remember, in the second wave, people who weren't brought there can just sort of report to the emergency room, so this number may go up later. But right now there are 22 people at Mass General, 6 of them are critical, and at the Brigham there are 18 to 20, 2 of them critical. At Tufts there are 9, and at Children's Hospital there are 4.
Now, there's something else going on at Tufts. What do we know about that?
Well, originally they had evacuated the emergency room for, I guess, precautions. And now I just heard a few minutes ago that they've brought the patients back in. So something happened there, some signal, or maybe just an overabundance of caution that they actually evacuated the emergency room.
So they are back in business. At this time in Boston, investigators are together. Rick Delorier, the special agent in charge of the Boston field office of the FBI, Ed Davis, the police commissioner, the commander of the Massachusetts State Police, and they're trying to put together their long-range investigative plan for as long as this is going to take, but of course also what are they going to do over the next 24 hours as they deal with this situation, which is still rather fluid as this information crystallizes.
John, I just heard the emergency room we now know at Tufts was evacuated due to an abundance of precaution because there was a suspicious package, and that package was determined not to be a threat, and so nobody's been arrested, and the emergency room is now open to patients.
So it is 6 o'clock in the East. The President of the United States is expected to brief reporters at the White House in about 10 minutes, at about 10 minutes after 6. But of course, this is a fluid situation, and these times are subject to changing. The Boston mayor is also expected to have new information for us shortly, and as soon as we see either the mayor or the president, we will switch you directly to those news conferences. This is an act of terrorism. 2 bombs struck the Boston Marathon. As runners were finishing, the bombs were planted in the crowd in an area right next to the finish line where there were hundreds, if not thousands, of people cheering the runners on. One bomb exploded a little bit before 3 o'clock, about 2:50, and then only seconds later, a second bomb 2 blocks away also exploded in the crowd. We were told by Boston police some 2 hours ago that 2 people were killed, but that is the kind of thing that unfortunately is likely to change as time wears on. We have checked with the hospitals in the area, and by our tally, there are about 50 people who are wounded, being treated at the hospital. Many are in critical condition. Others are not as gravely wounded. We have a number of pictures of the actual explosions themselves. Let's go to the picture that we have of the first bomb exploding at the finish line. This is video that we received courtesy of the Boston Globe newspaper. That's the finish line bomb. Now listen for the next. And there's the second bomb. It's about 2 blocks away, straight down the street. The Boston Police Commissioner is telling us that they are questioning suspects. No one is in custody. No one has been arrested. But the Boston Police Commissioner says that they are interviewing, questioning suspects. It's about all we know about that at the moment. We do not know who did this. There have been no credible claims of responsibility yet. We do not know if it was an act of terrorism inspired overseas or a domestically inspired act of terrorism. We have a piece of videotape that captured the audio of the second explosion. This tape begins after the first explosion. People are wondering what's going on, and then it captures the audio of the second explosion. Let's listen into that.
Whoa! Something just blew up at... Run! Go!
You could hear the lady say something just blew up, and then, of course, the second blast. The sound of the blast quite deafening at that location, but it was about 2 blocks away. We have another videotape, a very short little clip of videotape of the first bomb exploding near the finish line. We'll show that to you now. There it goes. Behind that blue fence, there are hundreds, if not thousands of people cheering the runners on. Look at the runner in the middle of the road there. The concussive force of the blast knocks him straight down to the ground. They are just shy of the finish line there. The race is a little over 4 hours in at this point.
Scott, one of the things that we're going to learn about this explosion, this pair of explosions, in a very short order, is going to be a little bit about that device. When you see that runner go down, there's 2 things that happen when a device goes off. One is the blast pressure, and that pushes out, and that's the kind of thing that'll knock people over. We'll also learn if there's shrapnel, and that would be nails, nuts, and bolts, something that you'd put in with that device. And they'll learn that at the emergency room when they start taking those pieces out of people, if in fact that kind of anti-personnel device was used. The second thing after the blast pressure, though, is what they call overpressure. And with a great pushing out of explosive force, there's also a great sucking in that happens right after that. And that's where a lot of the injuries that emerge later come through. And I'll defer to Dr. LaPook on that. But what you'll see is people who are very obviously injured by the explosion. But then 48 hours from now, you'll have people coming in who are suffering the beginnings of traumatic brain injuries, problems with their ears, with balance, with their vision, and those are going to be injuries from the overpressure, people that walked away in shock and didn't even know what happened to them.
The White House tells us that the president will be appearing in the briefing room there at the White House in about 5 minutes' time, and Major Garrett is there now. Major?
Well, Scott, the president has gone through a series of briefings this afternoon since first learning of this terrorist attack in Boston shortly after 3 p.m. First briefing came from Lisa Monaco, the president's new White House counterterrorism and Homeland Security advisor. Then he spoke with the FBI director, Robert Mueller. Then his Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano. The president just recently spoke to Speaker John Boehner about this, about 5:30 Washington time, about what he knows, and discussing that with the Speaker of the House. The White House, or rather the Speaker's office, just released a photograph of that phone call. Briefings throughout the afternoon for the president, and at 6:10 Eastern time, we expect the president to be here in the briefing room to put this terrorist attack in some context for the American public. We are not expecting any broad declarations other than this is an active investigation, perhaps criminal, perhaps terrorist, perhaps a little bit of both. The president will try to put this in context for the American public. We expect him here in the briefing room any moment now.
Major, thank you. The photograph you just saw was the president speaking with Robert Mueller, the director of the FBI, who presumably is in his command center at FBI headquarters, a facility set up for after 9/11 for exactly this kind of event. The president will be coming into the briefing room shortly, and as soon as we see him walk through the door, we will switch you live to the White House to hear his remarks.
I think when you look at the team at the White House that's going to be handling the crisis management part of this from the big picture, from the White House, 30,000-foot level, I don't think you could have it more seamless. I mean, what you have is President Obama, his new advisor on terrorism is Lisa Monaco. She has been at the Department of Justice as the chief prosecutor in the division that handles the lone wolf, domestic and international terrorism, al-Qaeda cases. So she has a great depth in this. Before that, she was chief of staff to FBI Director Robert Mueller. So she also has an intimate understanding of how the FBI operates in a major incident. On the flip side, she's replacing John Brennan, who's now director at the CIA. and will be part of the machinery that reaches out for clues if there are any overseas. So you couldn't have a team that has worked together more closely between the FBI director, the Deputy National Security Advisor for Terrorism, the CIA director. None of this is going to be new to them.
As we await the president in the briefing room, let's bring you up to date on what we know. It was a little before 3 o'clock, about 2:50. 2 bombs went off amid the crowd cheering the runners at the Boston Marathon on Boylston Street, right there by the finish line. One bomb separated from the other by about 2 blocks. The finish line there at the bottom of the screen, that was the first explosion. 15 seconds later, the second explosion about 2 blocks up Boylston Street. Boston police say they recovered a 3rd bomb unexploded and defused that. The police have said that 2 were killed, but we are given to understand that a number of people were in critical condition in the various hospitals, and therefore the number of people killed, unfortunately, is very likely to increase as the evening wears on. We have, from our count at the hospitals around Boston, about 53 people who are being treated in emergency rooms, some of them in critical condition. Some of them have suffered traumatic amputation of limbs in these twin blasts. There was an earlier report from the Boston police that there was another explosion at the John F. Kennedy Library. We have now cleared that up. There was no explosion at the John F. Kennedy Library, at least not a bomb there. Apparently there was a fire that occurred at exactly the same time in a mechanical room. Just an accident, nobody hurt, and we'll be learning more about that as the evening wears on as well. But apparently this act of terrorism is centered on the Boston Marathon. The president will be coming into the briefing room in about 1 minute. Our Major Garrett is there, and we'll be switching to the president live as soon as he comes into the briefing room. He has been speaking with his FBI director, Robert Mueller, and they have been coordinating the federal response to all of this. 2 bombs, at least 2 dead, 50 wounded at the Boston Marathon today in a terrorist attack just before 3 o'clock Eastern Time.
Scott, as we talk to other cities, Los Angeles is looking at upping security, Chicago, Washington, D.C. at critical locations, and of course the London has the marathon coming up.
And here comes the president into the briefing room.
Earlier today I was briefed by my Homeland Security team on the events in Boston. We're continuing to monitor and respond to the situation as it unfolds, and I've directed the full resources of the federal government to help state and local authorities protect our people, increase security around the United States as necessary, and investigate what happened. The American people will say a prayer for Boston tonight, and Michelle and I send our deepest thoughts and prayers to the families of the victims in the wake of this senseless loss. We don't yet have all the answers, but we do know that multiple people have been wounded, some gravely, in explosions at the Boston Marathon. I've spoken to FBI Director Mueller and Secretary of Homeland Security Napolitano, and they're mobilizing the appropriate resources to investigate and to respond. I've updated leaders of Congress in both parties, and we reaffirm that on days like this there are no Republicans or Democrats. We are Americans united in concern for our fellow citizens. I've also spoken with Governor Patrick and Mayor Menino and made it clear that they have every single federal resource necessary to care for the victims and counsel the families. And above all, I made clear to them that all Americans stand with the people of Boston. Boston police, firefighters, and first responders, as well as the National Guard, responded heroically and continue to do so as we speak. It's a reminder that so many Americans serve and sacrifice on our behalf every single day, without regard to their own safety, in dangerous and difficult circumstances. And we salute all those who assisted in responding so quickly and professionally to this tragedy. We still do not know who did this or why, and people shouldn't jump to conclusions before we have all the facts. But make no mistake, we will get to the bottom of this, and we will find out who did this. We'll find out why they did this. Any responsible individuals, any responsible groups will feel the full weight of justice. Today is a holiday in Massachusetts, Patriots' Day. It's a day that celebrates the free and fiercely independent spirit that this great American city of Boston has reflected from the earliest days of our nation. And it's a day that draws the world to Boston's streets in a spirit of friendly competition. Boston is a tough and resilient town, so are its people. I'm supremely confident that Bostonians will pull together, take care of each other, and move forward as one proud city, and as they do, the American people will be with them every single step of the way. You should anticipate that as we get more information, our teams will provide you briefings. We're still in the investigation stage at this point, but I just want to reiterate, we will find out who did this, and we will hold them accountable. Thank you very much.
The president in the briefing room of the White House, live, not taking questions. As he said, not a great deal known at this point in time. All Americans, the president said, stand with the people of Boston. A terrorist attack at the Boston Marathon has killed at least 2, likely more. At least 50 people are wounded in area hospitals, many in critical condition. Some evidence of traumatic amputation among those most gravely wounded. The bomb struck a little bit before 3 o'clock. It was about 2:50 Eastern Time. One bomb and then another. We have videotape of the explosion of the first bomb, and you hear the second bomb immediately thereafter. Let's go to the videotape and show you what happened at the finish line. There's a short clip of video here that shows the explosion, the effect on the runners falling to the ground. Hundreds of people in that crowd behind the blue fence watching the finish of the Boston Marathon. We have another videotape of that first explosion, followed by the sound of the second explosion. That's the first explosion. You see the smoke clearing there. And now as the camera begins to pan left, there is the smoke from the second explosion about 2 blocks away. It was on Boylston Street at the finish of the 26.2-mile Boston Marathon. Here's the explosion again. That's the first one. Listen for the second. And there's the second, 2 blocks down the road. As you just heard the president say moments ago, we do not know who did this. It is an act of terrorism, to be sure, but we do not know whether it is an act of domestic terrorism or an act of terrorism inspired overseas. It is interesting to note that going into 3 hours and more after this, there has been no credible claim of responsibility. The president said, we don't know who did this, but whoever it is will feel the full weight of justice. The words of the president just a few minutes ago.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God.
As terrible as this is, whoever planned it to be even worse. Boston police tell us they found a third bomb, unexploded, which they have now safely defused. That bomb will undoubtedly be a wealth of evidence for the investigation as it goes forward. There was a report earlier in another news conference by the Boston police that there was an explosion at the JFK Museum in Boston, the John F. Kennedy Museum. But we now are told that that was apparently an accidental fire in a mechanical room and that no one was hurt there. And apparently there was no bomb there. What we know at this point is at least 3 bombs targeting the last 2 blocks or so of the Boston Marathon. 2 exploded. 1 was discovered unexploded and is now in the hands of the police. John Miller, going forward now, the president spoke just a moment ago about speaking with the FBI director and all of the resources of the federal government. How do they move out? How quickly can they amass the information that they need in this investigation?
Very quickly, and in fact that can work in their favor, getting that information together, getting it fast, getting the data systems up there that are going to make all the leads that come in searchable. That's a good thing. It comes with a bad thing, which is they're going to have a massive amount of information coming in, calls, tips, emails, things on Twitter, and that pile is going to grow, and that enhances the needle in the haystack kind of quality of these things.
It is interesting to remember that Tim McVeigh was found the evening of the explosion in Oklahoma City because evidence was found in the debris, a VIN number off the vehicle that he had rented. FBI agents were able to speak to the people who rented the vehicle in Kansas, and by the end of the day, they knew who Tim McVeigh was.
Or if you look at the 1993 truck bombing of the World Trade Center that killed 6 and injured 1,000, there you have, you know, within really 72 hours, a VIN number found on a piece at the bottom of the rubble traced to a rented van in New Jersey, and when they went to go find out who rented the van, they said the guy was coming back to collect his deposit because he reported it stolen. That led to an entire cell of people that had to be tracked down around the world, including Ramzi Youssef, whose uncle would later go on to plan 9/11 and the destruction of the World Trade Center. But it underlines your point. The clues are small things, and being good means you'll find one, and being lucky means you may find one faster.
But even with these bombs that exploded, in the hands of experts, there's a lot of evidence there.
That's true. They will be able to assemble those devices. Now, I watched those explosions a number of times very carefully. These are not terribly large bombs, and those fragments are going to be collectible. What they do is they fan out in a crime scene like that, and they find the furthest possible fragment of the bomb, and then they go out 3 times the length of that, figuring there's fragments further that they can't see, and they will do a grid search where they pick up anything as small as a piece of copper wire, a strand even, and they'll put that together at the Terrorist Explosive Device Analysis Center down in Quantico, and they will then match that. Now you have a number of opportunities there. Is there a thumbprint on a piece of tape used to tie a timer there? Is there a hair that fell in during the making of that device that the bomber never knew he lost, that leads to a piece of DNA that leads to something that's already in the record? So putting those together is going to be quite important. You can also glean things just by looking at the construct of the plan. You've got the first device goes off over here. Within 10 seconds, a second device goes over there. That'll raise some immediate questions, which is they were timed very closely together. That means somebody had to walk into that location and put one down and then place another one. That individual likely did that fairly close to the time that the bomb was set to go off. Why? Because even today, more than a decade after 9/11, at a high-security event like the Boston Marathon, if somebody sees a backpack or a case lying unattended on the sidewalk, they're going to call that in, and that's going to possibly damage the opportunity. So these things were likely placed not long before they went off, even if they were put in a garbage can. That raises the next question, which is, did somebody carry live bombs to that place knowing that they were timed to go off close together and get far enough away not to get blown up in it? Or was it what they call a command detonation with a remote control where somebody pressed that button and watched the whole thing right there on the scene?
Dr. John LaPook has been talking with the hospitals that have been receiving the injured.
Right.
What do you know?
I just got off the phone with Dr. Ron Walls, who's the director of the Department of Emergency Medicine at the Brigham. There are 26 patients, equal number of men and women, going from the late teens to 62. There was a 3-year-old who was transferred immediately to Children's Hospital because they're not set up to handle that. 8 to 9 went to the OR. 2 of the 26 are critical. 8 to 10 are serious. The rest are lacerations, fractured bones, lots of concussive eardrum injuries, and there's a shrapnel injury. He pointed out it's not evidence that it was part of the device, but more like metal that was nearby that got thrown into the patient's body. You can see these on X-ray. None of them in critical places. The 2 that are critical, one person had an injury in the head and the neck from the blast. The other had a severe limb injury to the leg. It's not amputated yet. And there are no deaths. Of the 26, all had physical injuries. And he said, quote, they were very, very shaken, far beyond what the physical injuries would bring. So these are people who are ordinary, who are witnessing carnage that they're just not used to seeing.
Now, John, make sure I understand, is that a report from just one of the hospitals?
Just the Brigham. Just the Brigham.
Brigham and Women's Hospital.
Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston.
And what we also know from your reporting is that there are more than a dozen wounded at other hospitals as well.
Oh, sure. Well, there were 22 at the Mass General. There are 9 at Tufts, and there are 4 at Children's. So we're talking about 53 to 55 people who we know are injured. And as I say, I mean, he was very, very describing very powerfully how disturbed people were at seeing limb parts on the ground, these bad injuries that they had never seen before.
So to be clear, when we say no deaths among the injured, we're talking about that one hospital.
At the Brigham. And he said there were 60 docs down there. Normally there were 15. There were 58 to 60 nurses. Usually there are half that number. So he said, as we've pointed out, they drill like this like crazy. They're a level 1 trauma center, as all of these ones that we're describing about Mass General and the Brigham, and they were ready for this.
Level 1 trauma center having all the equipment and all of the expertise and all of the talent necessary to be among the top trauma centers in the country, if not in the world. So the Boston police told us some 2 hours or so ago that there were 2 dead, but we fear that that number could increase. As John was telling us, there are more than 50 who have been wounded and are in various emergency rooms. The report from Brigham and Women's emergency room is that there are many injured, but no one has died there. But many other hospitals are involved in all of this, and we expect this information to become fuller as time goes on. Let me just recap for you what we know at this point in time, and also show you the events that we have been covering for the last 3 hours or so. It was about 10 minutes before 3 Eastern Time when a terrorist or terrorists attacked the Boston Marathon. Runners were crossing the finish line, and there you see the first explosion. Now listen in, and you will hear the second 2 blocks away. You heard the second explosion, saw the first one. These were the sights and sounds immediately after.
We've had an attack.
Ago, the President of the United States said that we don't know who did this, but whoever did it will feel, as he put it, the full weight of justice. Bob Orr has reported to us from Washington that, at least as of now, there have been no credible claims of responsibility. We do not know whether this act of terrorism was inspired overseas or inspired domestically. At least 2 dead, more than 50 wounded. We have another videotape of the first bomb exploding. It's just a very small snip of a videotape that captured the blast and the effect that it had on the runners as they were coming by. Let's see if we can look at that short.
Something just blew up.
This is a tape of the sound of the second explosion. You heard the woman say something just blew up. And the second explosion was captured on the tape. These are very early moments. Bob Orr has been talking to his sources in law enforcement. And Bob, what do you know now?
Scott, I don't want to overstate this, but we can say that right now there are no quote-unquote suspects in custody. But a law enforcement official has just told us that investigators right now are questioning someone who is possibly linked to this. So that could be a break. It's still very early on, but it's at least a lead for investigators, Scott.
Bob, thank you very much. We also understand from John Miller, who's been talking to his sources, that a lot of surveillance video of the moments before the explosions caught a number of people that the Boston police are interested in speaking to. We don't know if they will end up being suspects, but there are a number of clues, we understand, on surveillance video that was taken. This is another picture of the bomb exploding near the finish line, the first bomb. You see the runner in the middle of the frame going down because of the concussion from the blast. 2 bombs, little before 3 o'clock at the Boston Marathon. At least 2 dead, more than 50 wounded. And the details are still coming in. Persons unknown attacking Boston in the heart of the city. Some of you will be leaving us now. There will be much more on this terrorist attack at the Boston Marathon on your local CBS station and at cbsnews.com. And of course, we will be right back with an expanded edition of the CBS Evening News. I'm Scott Pelley in New York. Good day.
For news 24 hours a day, go to cbsnews.com.
Tonight, bombs explode at the Boston Marathon.
It was horrible. The scene that you saw was frickin' horrible.
There was chaos at the finish line.
It's so terrifying, it's so scary, and there was smoke and glass everywhere.
At least 2 are dead, many dozens hurt.
This is the CBS Evening News with Scott Pelley.
Good evening. A terrible day. Witnesses say it sounded like thunder. 2 bombs went off as dozens of runners were crossing the finish line at the Boston Marathon today. 1 explosion near the reviewing stand at the finish line injured bystanders, knocked many runners off their feet, and seconds later, another blast about 2 blocks away. At least 2 people are dead, although that number is expected to change. Dozens more than 50 have been hurt, some of them critically. Rescuers pulled the injured away in wheelchairs. Boston police have urged people to go home and avoid large crowds just to be safe. The attack came at the end of the Boston Marathon, a grueling 26-mile race from Hopkinton, Massachusetts to downtown Boston, ending on Boylston Street where the explosions occurred. We have a team of correspondents covering every angle of this attack, and we'll begin tonight with Terrell Brown in Boston.
Scott, Boston police have sealed off the streets here in the city of Boston, and many of the people that you see walking around, we've seen runners here, we see spectators as well. Many people standing around just searching for answers still at this point. Police vehicles driving up and down the streets here. We've seen the SWAT team and SWAT teams also moving around, helicopters hovering around overhead. We're actually 3 blocks away right now from where the initial explosion, that first explosion, happened. The explosion went off at the most crowded points of the race. 12 seconds later, there was a second explosion just a couple blocks away.
It's so terrifying, it's so scary, and it was so loud.
I just walked away 15 feet away, 20 feet, and, you know, a bomb went off, and it knocked me to the ground, and then, you know, everybody started running, panicking.
Jonathan Elias from CBS Boston station WBZ was nearby.
And I run over there, and there's body parts. I mean, people have been blown apart.
I have multiple people down here, okay? I don't know what the cause is. Stand by.
Police rushed to assist victims tangled in debris and broken glass, some missing limbs. Bloody spectators were carried into the medical tent that had been set up to care for fatigued runners.
There were some bad-looking people, and you know, I'm praying for all of them. You know, we are all trying to put pressure on all the wounds for everybody, tourniquets and whatever we could do, and it was chaos.
Runners were directed away from the chaos, and people were ordered to stay clear of trash cans.
Yes, sir, we're going to need more ambulances down to this location, okay? Yes, sir, they've been notified. They're on the way. We got every unit on possible going, sir.
About a half
Edward
hour
Davis
ago.
is the Boston Police Commissioner.
People should be calm, but they should understand that this is an ongoing event, and they should understand that we need all the information that we can get available to us.
Police are not describing the nature of the bomb or giving any specifics at this point, Scott, or whether shrapnel was involved.
Terrell, thank you very much. The Boston police have told us that they believe there are at least 3 bombs, 2 that exploded, 1 that they discovered unexploded and defused. John Miller, former assistant director of the FBI, is our senior correspondent. You've been talking to your law enforcement sources all afternoon. John, what do you know?
Well, there is an individual who is in custody. Now, I want to proceed very carefully from here on out. He's in custody, which means he's not free to go. He's not under arrest. He's not charged. He is a Saudi national who was near the scene of the blast. When the blast happened, he began to run. Now, in context, a lot of people began to run. A civilian who thought that this individual was acting suspiciously chased him down and tackled him and then turned him over to Boston police saying, I saw this guy hanging around over there acting suspiciously, and then he ran. That may mean a lot. It may mean nothing at all. But authorities that I've spoken to, sources who are being briefed on this, say he's being fully cooperative. He's denying any involvement in this act.
So this has been 3 hours that this has happened. A lot of things are going to be thrown out the window in terms of leads as we go forward. The president said we don't know who did this, whether it was foreign or domestic.
Right, and I mean that is to clarify all these reports we're seeing in the media about a suspect in custody. It's too early to call him a suspect.
What is the FBI doing on the ground based on your experience right now?
Well, I've spoken to people up there, and they are pulling this together. So this will be an FBI lead. They will be assisted by the Boston PD and the Massachusetts State Police and the entire intelligence community. The case will be run out of the Joint Terrorism Task Force, which combines all the agencies in the Boston area. The special agent in charge, Rick Delorier, will have the point. It will be monitored very closely by Director Robert Mueller and his National Security and Counterterrorism team at headquarters, and they will be minute to minute on this till they have answers.
And we'll update on the latest information. John, thank you very much. In Terrell Brown's report, you heard Jonathan Elias, a reporter for our station in Boston, WBZ. He was right there on Boylston Street as the bombs went off. Can you tell us what you saw?
Scott, we were not more than 30 feet away from when this blast went off. Let me just sort of set the scene as what was happening at that moment with the marathon. We were a good 4 hours, maybe 4 hours and 2 minutes into the third and final wave. So the crowds, as far as spectators, began to slowly thin. I guess that would be the only silver lining in any of this, because they were 10 deep. And all of a sudden, coming across the finish line, we were watching and videotaping some folks, even high-fiving them and cheering them on, and all of a sudden this blast went off. It just shook us in our feet. And we were looking right at where it went off, so I saw the plume of smoke come up off the sidewalk. And we froze for a second, really not realizing what it was. We thought maybe, you know, we have old infrastructure in Boston. Perhaps it was some sort of underground gas, something. And the next second, another bomb up the street further went off. We knew exactly what was going on then. We reacted by running towards the scene, and it was a photographer, producer. We were running in, a lot of people running out. We were followed by a lot of EMS, a lot of police running toward that scene, and when we got to the sidewalk 30 feet away to see what was happening, what was on that sidewalk is something I will never forget. There were people that had literally had their legs blown off. There was a small child, he couldn't have been more than 5 years old, sitting there in upright position. He had a bloody face. He didn't look like he was badly wounded, but at his feet was either his mother or father with a leg blown off, and their eyes were all open. Everybody on the sidewalk that had been injured, they weren't crying out in pain. They weren't screaming for help. They were...
Jonathan Elias, we've apparently lost that communication with him. We'll try to get him back, but he was there at the moment that both bombs exploded. By our count, at the emergency rooms around Boston, there are more than 53 people being treated. Many of them are in critical condition. They were rushed to various emergency rooms under an emergency plan that had been set up long in advance. Kate Merrill from WBZ is at one of those emergency rooms at Brigham and Women's Hospital.
Scott, 26 of the patients were brought here to Brigham and Women's Hospital. The head of emergency telling me they range in age from as young as 3 years old to 62 years old. Half of them men, half of them women, and at least 2 are in critical condition tonight. 8 to 10 suffered serious injuries, and they're all seeing a wide range of injuries, all blast-related: severe head, limb, torso injuries, fractures and burns, and eardrum problems, all things consistent with a blast. The hospital is now on a lockdown here at Brigham and Women's. The FBI, the ATF, state and local police, all here. Armed guards are standing outside, which means family members trying to come here to see their loved ones can't get in. Only patients and staff. The head of emergency told me just a short time ago, this is something they train their whole lives for, but is something he himself has never seen, nor could he believe what he witnessed in the ER today. The good news here, none of the patients here at the Brigham have passed away, but they are facing some serious injuries here, and they receive the most patients here at the Brigham. But again, the good news is those patients, many of them having just eardrum and lacerations and fractures, with only a dozen or so with more serious type injuries. But a scene unlike anything these doctors here in Boston have ever seen. Scott, back to you.
Kate Merrill of WBZ. There are a number of hospitals in the area that had received victims of this terrorist attack. The latest we had from the Boston police was that 2 people had been killed. We don't know of any more than that, but Dr. John LaPook has been talking to the various emergency rooms. Doctor, what do you know now?
Well, I know that the number is now closer to about 60 or 61, Scott. We have about 22 at Mass General. We said there were 26 at the Brigham, and there are various other hospitals that are involved also. As we heard, the injuries range anywhere from a punctured eardrum to lacerations to very serious wound injuries. I spoke to the head of the emergency department, Dr. Walls, at Brigham and Women's, and he said that there was a serious leg injury, the serious head and neck injury, and of course punctured eardrums that they're seeing. But most of all, he said, in addition to those serious injuries, people were really shaken up. He said that people were just in shock at having seen these pieces of body parts and something they're just not prepared for.
One of the youngest victims that you know about is 3 years old.
3 years old and transferred to Children's Hospital because they're triaged to very specialty-oriented hospitals, and Children's is prepared to take care of kids that young.
John, best medical care in the world. Thank you. Thank you very much. It is very early in this investigation. It was just a short while ago that we heard the president say from the White House that we do not know who did this, but whoever did it would, quote, feel the full weight of justice, end quote. Bob Orr is in our Washington bureau. He's been talking to his sources about the investigation. Bob, what are you hearing?
Scott, it appears we're dealing here with a couple of relatively small but still powerful bombs that were placed in trash canisters along the marathon route, one near a crowd of spectators at the finish line and one a little further on down the race course. They went off in close proximity, which seems to suggest some planning here. Either more than one person was involved, or it was somebody, investigators figure, who had the time and the knowledge to set these timers in some kind of sequential pattern. We don't know if this is a foreign group or a foreign-inspired plot, or if it's a domestic group. That's wide open right now, and investigators are just starting to go through that. Scott?
Bob, we understand that there is surveillance video that is being examined by the various investigators. We also understand that a third bomb that did not explode has been taken intact by the Boston police and defused. What could all of that mean?
Well, that's very important evidence, potentially. The surveillance video in particular might help identify suspicious people near the area. We know about one man who John talked about who's now being questioned as possibly linked, and we want to emphasize possibly. The bomb, or even remnants of the exploded bombs, could tell us about how the bomb was constructed, maybe even who made it, the methodology that was involved, and that could point us either toward, like an al-Qaeda affiliate, like al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, or more towards a domestic-type component. So these are very important pieces of the puzzle as they start down the course of investigation, Scott.
Boylston Street, right in the heart of Boston, is likely to be a shut-down crime scene for quite some time as the police comb the area to look for every single clue that they can find from the explosions. Now, few people have as much experience in counterterrorism as the Commissioner of Police in New York City, Ray Kelly. He is joining us now on the telephone. Commissioner Kelly, I understand that you've put your force on a heightened level of alert. Why is that?
Well, Scott, as you know, we've had 2 successful major attacks here in New York City. We've had 16 plots against us since September 11th. We have devoted significant resources to protecting the city from a terrorist event. So this is what we do. We've done it in the past, and we're doing it right now.
What should New Yorkers do?
Well, New Yorkers should be alert, and we ask them to be aware of their surroundings. If they see anything suspicious, call our resources, call 911, call 311 if it's not an immediate emergency. But, you know, as I say, we've had the experience here of significant events and plots against us. So we would hope that New Yorkers are vigilant. We are in the crosshairs of terrorists, and we don't believe the threat has diminished very much. We don't know the genesis of this. We don't know who's responsible for it, but we sort of have to have a 360-degree perimeter in this city and other cities as well, obviously.
Ray Kelly, Police Commissioner of the New York Police Department. Commissioner Kelly, thank you very much. President Obama vowed to bring justice to whoever is responsible for the bombings. We'll have that part of the story when the CBS Evening News continues.
When you have diabetes, your doctor will say, get smart about your weight. I tried weight loss plans, but their shakes aren't always made for people with diabetes. That's why there's Glucerna Hunger Smart Shakes. They have carbs steady, with carbs that digest slowly to help minimize blood sugar spikes. And they have 6 grams of sugars. With 15 grams of protein to help manage hunger, look who's getting smart about her weight.
Glucerna Hunger Smart, a smart way to help manage hunger and diabetes.
When you get heartburn, it's too late for Prilosec. It takes at least 24 hours for full effect, but it's never too late for Zantac. Its fast-release acid blockers relieve heartburn in as little as 30 minutes. No pill works faster. When heartburn strikes, try Zantac.
Anyone have occasional constipation, diarrhea, gas, bloating?
Yes.
One Phillips Colon Health probiotic cap each day helps defend against these digestive issues with 3 strains of good bacteria. Live the regular life. Phillips.
The moments we share today inspire the stories we tell tomorrow. The luxurious Infiniti JX, a 7-seat crossover that actually seats 7 comfortably. With innovative second-row seating that makes third-row access effortless, even with a child seat installed. So your family can share every moment together. Right now, lease an Infiniti JX for $489 a month. Infiniti, inspired performance.
Don't miss a step, nothing's missed with a Tana twist.
wireless protection for the unexpected leak. Designed to fit your lifestyle. Tenna's stylish, active, and anywhere. Stylish is form-fitting. Active moves with you. And anywhere gives all-day comfort. The Tenna-proven personal care system is so absorbent, even when you twist, not a drop escapes. For a free sample, call 1-877-GET-TENNA.
When you're at the corner of multivitamin and multiple choice, come to Walgreens for help finding the one that's right for you. Like Centrum. Now get $4 off select Centrum products with Balance Rewards card at the corner of happy and healthy.
Centrum has been a leader in multivitamins for over 30 years, and now it's the most doctor recommended, the most preferred, and the most studied. So when it comes to getting the most out of your multivitamin, the choice is clear. Centrum.
Back now with our continuing coverage of the bomb attack at the Boston Marathon. President Obama was briefed at the White House by his Secretary of Homeland Security, Jan Napolitano, and here you see him on the telephone with FBI Director Robert Mueller. Then the president spoke to the nation in the briefing room, and Major Garrett was there. Major?
Scott, the president in his prepared remarks did not call the attack in Boston an act of terrorism. But we just spoke to a top White House aide moments ago who said the president does consider it an act of terrorism and has ordered everyone in the federal government to treat it as such. The unresolved question, the big unresolved question, is this an act of domestic or foreign terrorism? And the president's mandate to everyone in the federal government is build the investigation slowly so the prosecution can be carried out successfully.
We still do not know who did this or why. And people shouldn't jump to conclusions before we have all the facts. But make no mistake, we will get to the bottom of this. And we will find out who did this. We'll find out why they did this. Any responsible individuals, any responsible groups will feel the full weight of justice. Today is a holiday in Massachusetts, Patriots' Day. It's a day that celebrates the free and fiercely independent spirit that this great American city of Boston has reflected from the earliest days of our nation. And it's a day that draws the world to Boston's streets in a spirit of friendly competition. Boston is a tough and resilient town, so are its people. I'm supremely confident that Bostonians will pull together, take care of each other, and move forward as one proud city. And as they do, the American people will be with them every single step of the way.
The White House says President Obama will receive updates throughout the evening. The president said that security has been increased in other cities across the country as necessary.
Major, thank you very much. As a precaution, security has been beefed up in New York City, especially in crowded areas, including Times Square, the World Trade Center site, the United Nations, and in the subway system. More than 1,000 counterterrorism officers have been mobilized in New York, in addition to the thousands of patrol officers always on the streets. We will have another look at the explosions and speak with the man who shot the video when we come back.
Research suggests cell health plays a key role throughout our lives. One A Day Women's 50 Plus is a complete multivitamin designed for women's health concerns as we age. It has 7 antioxidants to support cell health. One A Day 50 Plus.
Most people think that after an accident, you'll have to pay $500 for your deductible. The truth, at Allstate, you could pay $0. Allstate gives you $100 off your deductible the day you sign up. Then another $100 off every year you don't have an accident. Let the good hands reward your safe driving with a deductible that goes away.
Deductible rewards. One more way you're in good hands with Allstate.
I should definitely do laundry more often. Yeah. By the time I do, there are all these mystery stains. I mean, is this coffee? Could be gravy. Yeah. So now I use Tide Boost with my Tide. It's double powerful for when things get double iffy.
Together, Tide and Tide Boost double your power against stains.
That's my Tide.
Hungry for the best? It's Evie. Want to give your family the very best in taste, freshness, and nutrition? It's Evie. Eggland's best. Better taste, better nutrition, better eggs.
It's Evie. I thought ringing in the ears was something I just had to live with. Then my doctor told me about lipoflavonoid, said it improves inner ear circulation to help relieve the ringing. She was so right. Lipoflavonoid, #1 doctor recommended to relieve ringing in the ears.
If she keeps serving up sneezes,
she may be muddling through allergies. Try Zyrtec, powerful allergy relief for adults and kids 6 years and older. Zyrtec, love the air.
If you're suffering from constipation, Miralax or Metamucil may take days to work. For faster relief, try Dulcolax laxative tablets. Dulcolax provides gentle relief overnight, unlike Miralax and Metamucil that can take up to 3 days. For predictable relief, try Dulcolax.
Hey guys, kiss those lines goodbye. Look your best with My Looks. Feel free to express yourself and look years younger without surgery. Smooth gel fillers instantly turn back the clock against fine lines and wrinkles. Get the natural-looking, fuller lips you've always wanted. Trust your face to only the best board-certified plastic surgeons with thousands of satisfied patients. Feel the My Looks difference with locations in Miami, Boca Raton, and Fort Lauderdale. Call 888-990-9707 to schedule your free consultation. Love the new you.
On the attack at the Boston Marathon, we don't know who did this, but it is clear that the bombs were calculated to kill and wound as many people as possible, and to do so in front of one of the most photographed sports events in the world-famous Boston Marathon. Steve Silva is a senior sports producer at Boston.com. He shot some of these images of the explosions that we've been showing you, and Steve is joining us right now on the phone. Steve, what did you witness?
Scott, I was at the finish line about 2:50 p.m. getting the runners coming across, the folks running in the 4-hour zone. Apparently there were over 9,000 people still out on the course. I was squared up right on the finish line, and right off to my right, just out of the blue, it was a loud bomb, but it was a thud. There was a thud noise, and smoke went up in the air. And for a split second, maybe you thought, oh, is this some kind of a firework for some runner, famous runner coming across? But then we all, a few photographers, videographers, we ran toward the area. And as we're running, probably under 20 seconds later, the second bomb went off up one block up on Fairfield and Boylston Street. So we knew it was serious, and you could immediately see the carnage and the people and pools of blood and cuts from the glass. The Marathon Sports Building glass blew out of the front window. And then it was just pure chaos, as you can imagine. With we already had medical folks in the medical tent treating, the usual marathon runners, the cramps and such. And now they're suddenly involved in a triage situation, scrambling. I saw one gentleman whose leg was severed off at the knee, taken back, and I know there were more injuries like that.
There was stunned silence after the first blast, and then 15 seconds later, the second. What happened after that?
Just, police scrambling. I think there was just mass confusion and people didn't, know what the procedure was. Problem was the people that were injured in the blast were on the other side of the partition to keep them off of the race course. So everyone had to pull the partitions away to get to the people, and then, radio the people in the medical tent, and then the police came. But you couldn't get outside help because all the roads were blocked off, and the sidewalks were then thick with about 10, 15 people. So people were just running in every direction but didn't really know which direction to go. It was just pure chaos.
Steve Silva, thank you very much. We will update you with the very latest information that we have when we come back in just a moment.
We had never used a contractor before and didn't know where to start.
At Angie's List, you'll find reviews on everything from home repair to healthcare, written by people just like you.
No company can pay to be on Angie's List, so you can trust what you're reading.
Angie's List is like having thousands of close neighbors where I can go ask for personal recommendations.
That's the idea.
Before you have any work done, check Angie's List.
From roofers to plumbers to dentists and more, Angie's List. Reviews you can trust.
I love you, Angie. Sorry.
New York strips, sudden trips, Mr. Wiggles, and curling irons. For the little mishaps you feel, use Neosporin to help you heal. It kills germs so you heal 4 days faster. Neosporin. Also try Neosporin Eczema Essentials.
This is America. We don't let frequent heartburn come between us and what we love. So if you're one of them people that gets heartburn and then treats day after day, block the acid with Prilosec OTC. And don't get heartburn in the first place.
One Village Morning, 24 hours, zero heartburn.
You could be at the corner of Medicare Part D and up to 75% lower copays. As a preferred pharmacy, Walgreens can save you as much as 75% compared to other select pharmacies. Walgreens, at the corner of happy and healthy.
This is George. The day building a playset begins with a surprise twinge of back pain and a choice.
Take up to 4 Advil in a day, or 2 Aleve for all-day relief.
That's handy.
Introducing Debbie Boone for Lifestyle Lift.
Today we're letting you know about Lifestyle Lift, a breakthrough medical process that really does turn back the hands of time. Imagine waking up, going to the mirror, and seeing yourself the way you looked years ago.
I'm a firm believer that if there's something you can do to make yourself feel better about yourself, then absolutely go do it.
I looked old, and now I look healthy, young. I never looked this good. It's the first thing people look at. They look at your face. So I'm very, very happy that I had the Lifestyle Lift done.
Lifestyle Lift makes it possible to get noticeable, natural, and lasting results with options that take as little as an hour. And Lifestyle Lift is more affordable than you may think. Call the number you see on your screen right now to receive your free information kit. The call is confidential, the information is free, and there's absolutely no obligation. Give yourself the gift of a Lifestyle Lift.
CBS News special coverage of the Boston Marathon explosions continues tomorrow on CBS This Morning.
Here's what we can confirm at the moment of the terrorist attack at the Boston Marathon. At least 2 people were killed. About 50 others are being treated in hospitals. Many of them are in critical condition. 2 bombs exploded within about 2 blocks of each other, just 15 seconds apart, near the finish line of the marathon and in the crowd. It happened as runners raced past and spectators cheered them on. Boston police say they recovered a 3rd bomb that did not explode. President Obama vowed that whoever is responsible will, in his words, feel the full weight of justice. But we don't know who might have done this. Much of downtown Boston remains sealed off tonight. The entire area is a crime scene. Some CBS stations will be leaving us now for local programming, but for many of you, the CBS Evening News will continue in a moment.
Made in America, it makes us walk a little taller and stand a little prouder. So you might just light up a room a little brighter, knowing that at FPL, we've reduced our use of foreign oil by 98%, from 40 million barrels a year to less than 1 million. And in its place, we're using cleaner, U.S.-produced natural gas and our state's very own sunshine. We're changing Florida's energy today to create a better tomorrow for all of us. At FPL, we're changing the current.
T is talking a lot about its so-called advanced digital network. But when they upgrade you to UVerse, you end up with the same old DSL speed. Xfinity is doubling the speeds on 2 of its fastest internet tiers. That's right, double. So now gaming, downloading, and streaming happen even quicker. Don't fall for UVerse. Xfinity Internet is 4 times faster, period.
Sign up today or get started with this great offer. Call 1-800-XFINITY.
You're watching South Florida's CBS 4.
Tonight, bombs explode at the Boston Marathon.
It was horrible. The scene that you saw was frickin' horrible.
There was chaos at the finish line.
It's so terrifying, it's so scary, and there was smoke and glass everywhere.
At least 2 are dead, many dozens hurt.
This is the CBS Evening News with Scott Pelley.
Good evening again, and for those of you who are just joining us, this is a special expanded edition, part of the CBS Evening News coverage of the terrorist attack today in Boston. Here is what we know at this hour. 2 bombs went off near the end of the Boston Marathon race as runners were making their way to the finish line. What was to be a moment of triumph turned tragic in an instant. At least 2 people have been killed. More than 50 are being treated in hospitals. Many of them are in critical condition. A 3rd bomb that did not explode was recovered by police. Tonight, a massive investigation is underway. There has been no credible claim of responsibility, and there was no warning. President Obama vowed to find and bring to justice whoever is responsible. Jonathan Elias of our CBS Boston station WBZ was right there at the scene on Boylston Street when the attack occurred. Jonathan?
Well, Scott, our backs were actually up against the grandstand. It's from behind the grandstand that we understand they recovered the device that did not detonate. But if our backs were to the grandstand and literally like right across the street is where that bomb went off, it would probably be the equivalent of, see these guys walking here behind me? That's about the distance it was that the bomb went off. It was 30 feet away at the finish line across Boylston. That's where all the runners were coming across the finish line. Perfect day. The runners were ecstatic that we're coming across the line. We were standing there with our photographer and producer and high-fiving and celebrating with the runners. And in an instant, we heard this blast. It shook us. It really just rattled us. And we see the smoke come up off the sidewalk. And for the first instant, everybody just stood still, not knowing what had just taken place. And within a matter of seconds, another bomb 2 blocks up had gone off, and at that point, everybody knew what was going on. People were running in Boylston Street, jumping into the street and running past us in each direction, and then we ran toward where the bomb had gone off, and we were followed by EMS and some of the volunteers from the race. And there was a barrier. If you can see this fence here behind me, those fences right there were all wrapped around Boylston to keep the runners separated from the spectators. And those fences actually blocked the EMS from getting to the folks on the sidewalk that were hurt. The photographer I was working with, Brian Foley, big 6'5" guy, he grabbed that fence while shooting at the same time and yanked the fence back. And then the scene that we saw on that sidewalk, Scott, it's hard to even, it's hard to get your head around. I mean, I saw in all the carnage, there must have been an 8-year-old boy or a 5-year-old boy sitting upright. He didn't look injured, but at his feet was either his mother or his father with a leg blown off. Their eyes were all open. Nobody was crying out and screaming for help. Nobody. It was as though everybody was absolutely shell-shocked in that moment, completely not coming to grips with what had just happened to them. And all around us, there were people with horrific injuries. Legs had been blown off, arms had been blown off. People had internal bleeding. There was open wounds. It was horrible. And there was nothing that really we could do except pull that fence back to let the EMS get in there. But I have to say, had that bomb gone off an hour earlier at the end of the race for the elite runners, they were 10 deep in that sidewalk. But because it went off in the 4th hour of the 3rd wave, you only had maybe 3 or 4 deep in that sidewalk. So it was, there's no silver lining this, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, there could have been hundreds of people. At last check, we know that 90+ people, 98 people are in area hospitals. As many as 20 of those are critical care patients, and 2 people have been killed. And right now, a lot of people are asking, who's responsible? Scott?
And that we do not know yet. Jonathan Elias, thank you, from WBZ. Jonathan was mentioning the people who were wounded. They're now being treated in some of this nation's best hospitals, and Don Daler is at one of them, Massachusetts General. Don, what do you know?
Scott, the doctors here are saying that had there not been so many first responders at the scene of the tragedy there to care for the runners, there probably would have been many more fatalities. As it is, though, the people who were brought to places like Massachusetts General in the Boston area suffered terrible injuries. The 2 bombs left scores of injured, the scene reminiscent of a war zone. Medical tents set up for the race were quickly transformed into emergency rooms where nurses treated lacerations, broken bones, and severe injuries to legs and feet.
What really surprised me was the number of people and just the really the amount of blood, the amount of injuries.
One woman had lost her leg, lots of bleeding. Some children were involved as well. And we took care of the ones that we could and got them into the ambulances as soon as possible.
Spectators made makeshift tourniquets to stem the bleeding. This man, one of the onlookers, completely lost his feet.
This time.
Chief of Emergency Services at Massachusetts General, Alastair Kahn.
Some of the patients have already received traumatic amputations at the scene. Their legs, they feel like, are being blown off. This is like a bomb explosion that we hear about in the news in Baghdad or Israel or some other tragic space in the world.
And we know of 3 children at least who were injured, including a 2-year-old boy who suffered severe head injuries. Scott.
Don, thank you very much. It is early in the investigation. About an hour ago, the president briefed the country and said that we do not know who did this, whether it was domestic terrorism or inspired overseas, but he said whoever did it would, in his words, feel the full weight of justice. Homeland Security correspondent Bob Orr has been talking to his sources all afternoon. And Bob, what can you tell us about the investigation so far?
Scott, at this hour, there is no suspect in custody. We are told, though, by officials that there is a young man who they are talking to who, quote unquote, could be potentially linked. But it's very, very early on, and it's far too strong to say this is a suspect. This is someone who was seen near the site of the blast, who was acting suspiciously, and they certainly have to run that to ground to find out if he had any involvement at all. We know there were 2 devices that exploded. They had been placed in trash cans. There are also 2 unexploded devices that were recovered near the finish line. And that could be very important because those unexploded bombs and also the remnants of the exploded bombs could provide the kind of forensic evidence that might eventually tell us who put them together, how they were put together, and where this attack originated. But right now, let's be clear. This is a wide-open investigation field. The suspects range from international terrorists to lone wolves inspired by international terrorists to perhaps even someone acting on their own on behalf of some kind of domestic cause. It's in the very early stages here, and officials are running every trap. It's a full-court press to find out how this happened, Scott.
And, Bob, you were saying to us earlier that there's been no credible claim of responsibility so far.
That's very important, too. There's been not only no claim of responsibility after the fact, Scott, but there was nothing that I'm aware of in the intelligence reporting pipeline in advance of this attack to signal that Boston was any kind of target today. This really came out of the blue. In fact, to give you an idea of how unexpected it was, it took almost an hour for some of the federal agents involved to even get to the blast scene. So this was not on anyone's radar, which suggests it was either very, very carefully planned or it was a very closely held plot by maybe 1 or 2 people, a lone wolf type plot.
Bob, thank you very much. Another reporter who was at the scene during the explosion was Kylie Atwood, a CBS News producer. She was on Boylston Street. And Kylie, what did you see?
Yeah, Scott, I was there. I was in between the 2 bombs. So when the first one went off, I was directly to the right of it. And we heard a loud explosion, looked around and saw smoke. And that's when we knew that something had gone wrong. We heard screaming, yelling. People started running. And I actually ran in the direction of the other bomb. Unfortunately, ran directly towards that. And that's when we started seeing young children being carried by their parents, being carried by police. We also saw some people on the ground. We saw blood all over. It was a really horrific, scary scene. And right now I'm standing in Copley Square in Boston, and this medical tent is where everyone was brought when they were hurt. And these people are truly the heroes today because they were the ones who had to deal with everything. And we talked to a lot of people who were not physically hurt, but mentally devastated and panicked by what they saw.
Kylie Atwood, thank you, Kylie. Let's orient you a little bit and show you where Kylie was when the bombs went off, give you some sense of the proximity of the 2 explosions. The first bomb was right next to the finish line at the bottom of the screen. The second bomb that went off about 15 seconds later was roughly 2 blocks up Boylston Street. The third bomb that did not detonate was also right there by the finish line. Senior correspondent John Miller is a former deputy director of the FBI. He's joining us right now. John, you've been talking to your law enforcement sources all afternoon. What do you know?
Well, either things are going really well or this is going to be very challenging, and that hangs on this individual they have in custody. So let's go back over that. How does this happen? It happens that the first device goes off, the second device goes off, and somebody who's noticed this individual saw him acting in a way that they thought was suspicious. They see him running away from the device. Now, a reasonable person after an explosion would be running away, but this person had noticed them before. This is a civilian now. Chases him down, tackles him, turns him over to the Boston police. The individual who is being looked at was suffering from a burn injury. That means that that person was pretty close to wherever this blast went off, but not so close as to suffer the serious injuries that other people did. He is in custody. Authorities tell me he's being fully cooperative, meaning he's answering all their questions, he's denying any involvement. I would say that they're going to be going over his communications. They'll look into his phone. They'll be getting, they'll try to look at every aspect of his life. And they'll want to talk to that person who found him and tackled him and say, what exactly was he doing that was so suspicious? So if that individual pans out, that, of course, gives the case a big jump forward. If not, then they're back to physical evidence, forensics, witnesses, and whatever they can pick up on those surveillance cameras.
These 2 blocks of Boylston Street, right in the heart of Boston, are sealed off now as a crime scene. What are they looking for?
Well, what they're looking for is what they can pick up about those 2 devices that detonated. What set them off? Were they command detonated, meaning was somebody standing in between them with a remote control? Were they controlled by a cell phone, where somebody could have been watching the finish line on television and detonated? Or were they carefully timed? And that would be a challenge, Scott, to have them timed to go off so close together and to place them in those places without them being detected as suspicious.
What does it mean for the investigation that at least one other bomb was recovered intact?
That is a big advantage, because it is a lot easier to work from a bomb that is intact than it is to piece one together from a million pieces and imagine the parts you can't find. If they have that, the forensic possibilities are almost endless. They could come up with a fingerprint, even one left unintentionally on a piece of duct tape. They could come up with a human hair that matches DNA that they may have taken any number of places. So that would be a big break.
Again, at this hour, we don't know who did this. We don't know whether it's an act of foreign terrorism or domestic terrorism, but the investigation continues, running leads, I suspect, worldwide at this point. John, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The bomb attack in Boston has the organizers of London's marathon looking at their security, because the London race is this Sunday. We have more on that from Elizabeth Palmer. Liz?
Good evening, Scott. Well, both the Metropolitan Police and the London Marathon organizers are watching events in Boston very closely and hoping for information from U.S. authorities that would indicate whether or not there is now an increased risk of attack here in London. The race is due to go on Sunday. More than 37,000 runners have been signed up, and of course there will be many more thousands of spectators along that 26-mile course. Now, the former head of counterterrorism of the Metropolitan Police told us earlier this evening that even if there is no hard evidence of an increased risk, the risk of copycat attacks will be assumed to have gone up. And so the police will go back over all the intelligence chatter they've had over the last few days very carefully, and probably even resurvey the route for what they would consider vulnerable areas in case they have to beef up security in those areas. But bottom line, he said, really along such a long course, there isn't a great deal they can do at this stage to make it 100% safe.
Elizabeth Palmer in our London newsroom. Liz, thank you very much. We will update you with the very latest information that we can confirm when we come back in just a moment.
CBS Tonight.
Welcome home.
If Barney's happily engaged.
Why do people go to a bar anyway? To get your drink on and some girl's pants off. I can do both at home.
Why is he checking out other women?
It's like bird watching. And right now, I am watching a double-breasted robin.
New How I Met Your Mother. Then,
here's your schedule for while I'm away, sir.
This seems doable.
So we both know the paper is blank. Can you email me this as well?
New rules after a New How I Met Your Mother. CBS Tonight, 8/7 Central.
Now through Wednesday, only at Rooms to Go. Choose from 50 great-looking rooms, all under $1,000. That's living rooms, bedrooms, and dining rooms. 50 different rooms, 50 great choices, each under $1,000. How's that for a great deal? So look around, find a room you want to change. Then hurry to Rooms to Go and choose from 50 different rooms, each under $1,000. Now through Wednesday, April 17th, only at Rooms to Go.
We have a go for auto sequence start. T-minus 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition.
Launch your internet experience on AT&T's newly expanded Advanced Digital Network and connect more Wi-Fi enabled devices at home.
Call to get UVerse high-speed internet starting at $14.95 a month, a guaranteed price for 12 months. Or ask how to get your choice of a Kindle Fire HD, Sonos Play 3, or Xbox 360 free with other qualifying internet offers.
And get more speed for Wi-Fi gaming, more reliability than ever, and more connectivity between devices.
So call to get UVerse high-speed internet starting at $14.95 a month, a guaranteed price for 12 months. Or ask how to get your choice of a Kindle Fire HD, Sonos Play 3, or Xbox 360 free with other qualifying internet offers.
UVerse high-speed internet,
where all systems are go.
2 dead, more than 50 wounded in the terrorist attack today in Boston. Before the Boston Marathon began, there was a moment of silence that lasted 26 seconds to honor each of the victims of the Sandy Hook massacre. And then a little over 4 hours later came the bombs at the marathon's finish line. Terrell Brown is in Boston tonight. Terrell, what's going on now?
Scott, you get the sense as you stand here that police still aren't taking any chances. I've been watching and talking to a security guard that's across the street here. By the way, many of the local businesses along the stretch where we are closed at this hour. And that security guard was told by police to continue checking the trash cans that are nearby, at least on this site. He has been pacing up and down the street. One of those trash cans, it looks like right now, actually being removed across the street. This happening at this very moment. As we take a look here, guys, they have been focusing on these trash cans along this block for some time now. As I mentioned before, police telling security here to look into these trash cans over and over and over again. Don't stop. So I've been watching the security guard pace the block here, looking at the trash cans along the street. It is these types of measures that are being taken right now, again, as police are telling folks here to not take any chances, to keep an eye out. The area is sealed off. That's police, that's fire. We've seen state police. We've seen SWAT teams. We've seen the FBI. We've seen U.S. Marshals, a contingent of law enforcement officials here, as this is still very much an active crime scene. We can't see what's happening. We're just on the periphery here. We're about 3 blocks away from where the initial explosion actually happened, but we've talked to a few witnesses that have described what they've seen back there, Scott, just beyond the perimeter there, and have talked about it being a very active crime scene even at this hour, Scott.
Terrell Brown, thank you very much. Boylston Street, at least 2 blocks of it locked down as a crime scene right in the heart of downtown Boston, likely to be locked down for some time as federal agents and local police walk inch by inch over that territory looking for any conceivable clue that they might have. It's going to take a while. Other cities have stepped up security in light of what happened in Boston today. We'll have a look at that next.
This is speeding. This is fast food. This is the express lane, and this is the fast track. This is the fastest in-home Wi-Fi. This is Xfinity Internet.
Reimagine your internet with Xfinity. Now with double the speeds on 2 of its most popular plans. Call for a great offer on Xfinity Internet from Comcast today, or ask about other plans starting at $24.99 a month for 6 months. Call 1-800-XFINITY today. Xfinity, the future of awesome.
AT&T is talking a lot about its so-called advanced digital network. But when they upgrade you to UVerse, you end up with the same old DSL speed. Xfinity is doubling the speeds on 2 of its fastest internet tiers. That's right, double. So now gaming, downloading, and streaming happen even quicker. Don't fall for UVerse. Xfinity Internet is 4 times faster, period.
Sign up today or get started with this great offer. Call 1-800-XFINITY.
There are those who brighten your day, the same way the smooth, creamy taste of Coffee Mate makes coffee and your day better. Coffee Mate, coffee's perfect mate.
More people in South Florida are waking up to CBS 4 News with Rhiannon Alley, Josh Benson, Lisette Gonzalez, and Vanessa Borge. Tune in to South Florida's fastest growing morning news. CBS 4 News this morning, weekdays starting at 5 a.m. CBS Health Watch. Lymphoma is a malignant tumor that originates in the lymph nodes which protect organs against infection. Dr. Isidore Losos is a professor of medicine of hematology oncology at Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center.
Lymphoma is a complicated disease. It may affect different organs, different systems, and very frequently we need assistance from other specialties. We work as a team.
CBS Health Watch is sponsored by Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center, South Florida's most advanced cancer care.
A number of major cities in the U.S. have increased their security precautions. Hundreds of counterterrorism officers have hit the streets in New York City, and Los Angeles is also ramping up its security. Bill Whitaker is in Los Angeles for us tonight. Bill?
Scott, police and sheriff's departments are adding extra security to high-profile locations, including public transit, government buildings, shopping centers, any place crowds of people might gather. There will be an increased police presence at sporting events, including tonight's Dodgers game in Los Angeles, which is a high-profile tribute game to Jackie Robinson. The stadium will be staffed with additional police officers, bomb squad personnel, and bomb-sniffing dogs. Commander Andrew Smith with the LAPD.
Well, we're looking at all our critical sites, of course, as we always do in situations such as this. But in this case, we're also looking at all the events where there are a large number of people.
The Sheriff's Department has activated its Emergency Operations Center, a high-tech command post that consolidates the city's emergency, police, and fire departments. Here, officials would coordinate any response to mass casualty events. And security has been beefed up at airports along the West Coast with more checkpoints, bomb-sniffing dogs, and security officers. San Francisco Police Chief Greg Sir.
This turns the clock all the way back to 2001 again, I think, at least until we find out exactly what happened in Boston, right? So whatever the thinking was on September 12th is now the thinking today.
Scott, there is no evidence of a threat, but until authorities know the nature of those explosions in Boston, they are taking no chances.
Security from coast to coast. Bill Whitaker in our Los Angeles newsroom. Bill, thank you very much. We're going to be back in just a moment with the very latest on the terrorist attack in Boston.
More than 1.1 million Americans.
If you're ready to get more from your TV service, now's a great time to get AT&T UVerse TV. Make the switch.
Call to get UVerse TV starting at $19 a month with qualifying bundles. Get the same great price for 2 years. Add HBO and Cinemax and get the first 3 months free.
With UVerse TV, you can record 4 shows at once with a total home DVR that lets you play back, pause, or rewind your shows from any room. And ask about next day installation at no extra charge.
Call to get UVerse TV starting at $19 a month with qualifying bundles. Get the same great price for 2 years. And get a $150 promotion card. Plus, get a total home DVR included for life.
And now, exclusively from AT&T, adding our wireless receiver lets you move your TV where you want around the house, even outside, so you're no longer tied to the TV outlet.
AT&T UVerse, TV like you've never seen before.
Phil, the air conditioner's been out for 2 days.
I got it.
Stay cool with a new Carrier AC from Service America. Call 888-201-5759 today and get a free 32-inch HD TV with a new energy-efficient AC unit. New AC, free TV, only from Service America.
Made in America. It makes us walk a little taller and stand a little prouder. So you might just light up a room a little brighter, knowing that at FPL, we've reduced our use of foreign oil by 98%, from 40 million barrels a year to less than 1 million. And in its place, we're using cleaner, U.S.-produced natural gas and our state's very own sunshine. We're changing Florida's energy today to create a better tomorrow for all of us. At FPL, we're changing the current.
This hour about the terrorist attack along the route of the Boston Marathon. 2 people are confirmed dead. Many more than 50 others have been wounded, perhaps as many as 90, and some of them are in critical condition tonight. 2 bombs went off near the finish line of the marathon today, which is also Patriots' Day, commemorating the beginning of the Revolutionary War. The blasts came 15 seconds apart, less than 100 yards from each other. A 3rd bomb was discovered by police nearby and was disarmed before it exploded. This happened about 2 hours after the winners crossed the finish line, after the crowds had thinned somewhat. We do not yet know whether this is a case of foreign or domestic terrorism, but CBS's Bob Orr has learned that authorities are already questioning someone who was arrested at the scene, who was detained at the scene, I should say, and who has been cooperative with police so far. President Obama insists that whoever is behind this will, quote, feel the full weight of justice. Much of the heart of Boston is shut down tonight. Security has been stepped up in major cities from coast to coast. Bob Orr is joining us in the Washington newsroom. Bob, is there any reason to believe that this is part of a larger plot?
As time goes on, Scott, officials are getting increasingly comfortable. They're a little nervous, but increasingly comfortable that this is not part of some wider plot. They would have expected, they say, to see activities in other cities if something were going to happen. Now, you can't take that to the bank, but that is the philosophy they're operating on right now. They're talking to this one person who they've been questioning about a potential involvement in what happened in Boston. But I have to emphasize this person is not a suspect, and I'm told it's way too early even to assume that he might be a person of real interest. Downtown Boston essentially is a crime scene. Agents now are going back along the entire route of the marathon looking for shrapnel and evidence as they piece this together, Scott.
Bob Orr, thank you. That is our expanded edition of the CBS Evening News.
People have saved thousands of dollars at Lexus of Pembroke Pines, and you should be next. Right now, drive a new IS from only $179 a month. The time to buy is now at Lexus of Pembroke Pines.
What was your great find at the festival today?
This reversible handbag, which is perfect for traveling.
Cool.
And I just bought these earrings and this lipstick.
You bought them and put them on already. I love that.
Instant gratification.
You could just show up naked to the festival and then come out looking amazing. Fantastic.
Does she look 81?
No way.
Right?
Happy birthday, dear Millie.
With a
Happy
Y.
birthday to you with a Y. Festival Flea Market Mall, Sample Road at the Turnpike, Pompano.
Found it.
Great news, Westchester. America's Best is now open.
They have the best prices on contacts and glasses.
Now you can get 2 pairs of glasses for $69.95 with a free eye exam.
You're going to love it.
Get 2 pairs of glasses for $69.95 with a free eye exam every day. Plus AccuView 2 and soft bed contacts as low as $12.49 a box. Call 1-800-2PAIR and schedule an appointment at your new America's Best today.
America's Best. The best prices in sight.
Good Neighbor Pharmacy wants you to breathe easy.
Did you know that 1 in 12 people in the U.S. has asthma, and the numbers are increasing every year?
What is the best way to control asthma? What can trigger an asthma attack?
What are the early symptoms of asthma? What is the right way to use an inhaler?
To get your questions answered, visit your Good Neighbor Pharmacist. And to test your knowledge, take the quiz today at mybreathing.com.
Wow. College already?
Yeah. We gotta go.
I love you.
I love you too, Daddy. And thanks for everything.
Gratitude. Pass it on. A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
Hundreds of people are saving thousands of dollars every month at Lexus of Pembroke Pines. You could be next, like on a new RX for only $279 a month.
Lexus of Pembroke Pines. Price, service, selection. Lexus of Pembroke Pines.
You're watching South Florida's CBS 4.
Terrorism strikes the Boston Marathon. 2 bombs explode near the finish line. At least 2 are dead, and more than 80 have been wounded.
This is the CBS Evening News with Scott Pelley.
Good evening. We are getting updated information now. As we just said, at least 2 people have been killed. It appears that at least 86 are being treated in various emergency rooms around Boston. Many of them are in critical condition after 2 bombs exploded at the Boston Marathon a little bit before 3 o'clock Eastern Time this afternoon. Police have recovered a third bomb that did not explode. We do not know who did this. There have been no claims of responsibility. It is not known whether it is an act of terror inspired by foreign interests or a domestic one. We have new pictures now of the second of the two explosions. That's it down at the end of the street there. This is Boylston Street in Boston, right in the heart of downtown Boston. The first explosion occurred right at the finish line, followed about 15 seconds later by the second explosion. That entire area of Boston has been shut down. It is a crime scene now, and Terrell Brown is there for us live. Terrell?
Scott, we are just outside of the perimeter that police have set up, and interestingly enough, just as we've been standing here while you were on the air tonight, we have watched a series of about 5 or 6 trash cans, public trash cans, removed from the block. There was a security guard that's in charge of just keeping after the businesses here in this block, was instructed by police to keep an eye on each individual trash can because of what appears to be just an abundance of caution. But now all of those trash cans have been removed. Even where we're standing, still very, very much an active crime scene. You can't see it from our vantage point now, but we had a chance to talk to some spectators, even some runners that have come from behind the perimeter, and they've described what they've seen there. Very much an ongoing investigation, and even from what we can see here now, we can see many of those police vehicles still making their way around the block. We are 3 blocks away from where that initial explosion happened. The explosion went off at the most crowded points of the race. 12 seconds later, there was a second explosion just a couple blocks away.
It's so terrifying, it's so scary, and it was so loud.
The scene was captured by onlookers using their cell phones.
Whoa, something just blew up.
Police rushed to assist victims tangled in debris and broken glass, some missing limbs. Bloody spectators were carried into the medical tent that had been set up to care for fatigued runners.
There were some bad-looking people, and I'm praying for all of them. We are all trying to put pressure on all the wounds for everybody, tourniquets and whatever we could do, and it was chaos.
Runners were directed away from the chaos, and people were ordered to stay clear of trash cans.
Yes, sir, we're going to need more ambulances down to this location, okay?
Yes, sir, they've been notified. They're on the way. We got every unit on possible going, sir.
Edward Davis is the Boston Police Commissioner.
People should be calm, but they should understand that this is an ongoing event, and they should understand that we need all the information that we can get available to us.
So this will be a very thorough and a very long investigation that we're hearing now. Scott, we talked to police earlier, and we were told that it could look like this for several days to come.
Terrell, thanks very much. As we mentioned a moment ago, at least 86 people are being treated in the hospital. Many are in critical condition. The youngest ages that we know of are 2 years old, 3 years old, and 9 years old. Some of the best hospitals in the nation are right there in Boston, and Don Daler is at one of them, Massachusetts General. Don, what do you know?
Scott, it's interesting. The hospitals are reporting that they did not immediately receive the casualties, and that's because there were so many people on the scene who were experts in first aid, first responders there, police, EMTs. They were all there, so they set up triage points on site, treated the victims there, put tourniquets on them, put pressure on their wounds until they could safely stabilize them and bring them to the hospitals. As you said, I'm at Mass General. They received 22 victims here. 6 are listed in critical condition, and the rest are being assessed right now. But as you said, the injuries themselves, the doctors report, are like something from a battlefield. Limbs that were missing, terrible head wounds. One of the victims here, there was a 2-year-old boy who suffered a terrible head wound. Now, Scott, to give you an idea of the heightened tensions in this area in Boston, which are completely understandable, the parking garage right here next to Mass General was just evacuated a few moments ago, and the police are doing a floor-to-floor sweep up there right now because someone reported a suspicious package.
Don, thank you very much. Dr. John LaPook, our medical correspondent, has been talking to the emergency rooms all afternoon long. John, what have you learned?
I've learned that people are coming in with anything from broken legs to amputations to eardrums that are popped to serious injuries. The kids were transferred to Children's Hospital, and there were 3 people, including that 2-year-old that Don mentioned has a severe head injury. He's in the medical surgical ICU. There is a 9-year-old girl who right now is in the operating room getting a very serious leg injury repaired.
These bombs, I should say, were planted right in the crowd and apparently lying right at their feet.
And maximal dangerous impact there. And it's interesting that the ability to do the triage right there is so important. We've learned over the last 10 years that the ability to do triage at war zones right there, it makes all the difference in terms of survival. And it was interesting that there was a delay getting to the local area hospitals, but that actually was a good thing because they were being resuscitated, they were being stabilized, the tourniquets were being placed, and then they were being transferred.
A big medical tent right there at the finish line. To repeat what we understand from Boston police, 2 dead, at least 86 wounded, but the number of deaths has not been updated in the last several hours. 2 dead, according to the Boston police, 86 wounded. Our senior correspondent, John Miller, has been working his sources in law enforcement. And John, what have you learned so far?
Well, they're working with the clues they have, and the clues they have are pretty interesting at this point. You've got the 2 devices that exploded. They're going to collect up all that evidence from as far as it flew and try to put those back together. They've got an awful lot of experience at that, particularly from war zones. Number 2, you have a device, at least 1 device, that has been reportedly recovered intact. That gives them a big jump. That device is still together and will really give them a roadmap to how they were made, what they were made of, what they were intended to do, and if it's a recognized signature of a bomber or a recipe they know, that's a leg up also. There's a piece of video from a security camera that shows an individual walking towards that area before the blast carrying 2 backpacks. They're trying to sweep the other cameras in the area. That shot is only from the back. They want to see who that person is from the front and if he might be relevant. And finally, and perhaps least importantly or most importantly, we just don't know yet. There's an individual who they are questioning who was seen acting suspiciously at the scene by someone who was chased running away from the blast and who has a burn injury indicative of the fact that he might have been pretty close to that package after it was placed. We don't know where those leads are going, but this is a foreign national, and he is reportedly cooperating with investigators and denying any involvement.
Of course, anybody would be running away from that blast, but the person who tackled him, do we understand why it was he thought he was so suspicious?
We don't, and that's going to be key, Scott. I mean, they're going to want to say to police, what exactly did you see, and what fixed you on this individual, and was it suspicious activity, or was it something else? And of course, as you point out, running from the scene is a natural thing to do. Many people were running from the scene, so the details are going to be important.
What can the best experts glean from the bomb fragments and bomb parts that they've recovered?
Well, an awful lot, depending on how the bomb maker handled it. But one of the things they learned in 2 war zones and numerous terrorist cases is fingerprints are inadvertently left behind. Remember, the bomber doesn't believe there's going to be much to recover. He's intending that that device is going to go off. So sometimes they're more sloppy than they would be. A hair may fall in there, which can offer DNA. And even if they've covered their tracks to leave all that out, simply the way the bomb is made, if it's something they've seen before, they've categorized all of them, and they may just recognize a bomber's signature, which will give them an indication.
This is a worldwide investigation at this point?
It is already. They have run traps through the 16 intelligence agencies. What's in the signals intelligence? What did the human sources say? Comb back over it. And not just what they have. They're sending people out around the globe and around the United States in the 56 field office of the FBI to say, tap your human sources. Maybe they heard something they didn't pass on.
Signals intelligence, of course, being eavesdropping on telephone calls and communications all around the world.
That's right.
John, thank you very much. Let us take you back through some of the events of just before 3 o'clock Eastern Time today. The bombs were placed not only to do maximum harm to the innocent bystanders who were there, but also obviously to be photographed at one of the most photographed events in the world, right there at the finish line. Let's have a look at some of the videotape. This is the first explosion. Let's listen in. You'll hear the second one in a moment. There's the second blast. It's about 2 blocks away. Also planted right in the spectator crowd on the sidewalk by the race. We have a couple of other views as well of the explosions as they struck the finish line at the Boston Marathon. This is a very short clip of video, shows the explosion. And as we show you again, watch the runner in the middle, right there, knocked to his feet by the concussive blast of the bomb itself. And there is at least one other view in which we can see both bombs as they exploded. This is the first bomb, the smoke clearing from the first one. And as the camera begins to pan to the left here in about 10 seconds, you'll see the second bomb. There it is, right in the middle of the picture. The smoke rising from the second bomb about 2 blocks away. Boston police have told us that there was a third bomb, but they recovered it intact and defused it before that could do any harm. Repeating now, the terrorist attack in Boston a little before 3 o'clock Eastern Time today has killed at least 2 people. At least 86 people were wounded. They are hospitalized. Many of them are in critical condition. We will be back with more on all of this in just a moment.
CBS Tonight.
Welcome home.
If Barney's happily engaged.
Why do people go to a bar anyway? To get your drink on and some girl's pants off. I can do both at home.
Why is he checking out other women?
It's like bird watching. And right now, I am watching a double-breasted robin.
New How I Met Your Mother. Then.
Here's your schedule for while I'm away, sir.
This seems doable.
So we both know the paper is blank. Can you email me this as well?
A new rules after a new How I Met Your Mother. CBS Tonight, 8/7 Central.
Now through Wednesday, only at Rooms to Go. Choose from 50 great-looking rooms, all under $1,000. That's living rooms, bedrooms, and dining rooms. 50 different rooms, 50 great choices, each under $1,000. How's that for a great deal? So look around, find a room you want to change. Then hurry to Rooms to Go and choose from 50 different rooms, each under $1,000. Now through Wednesday, April 17th, only at Rooms to Go.
We have a go for auto sequence start. T-minus 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition.
Launch your internet experience on AT&T's newly expanded Advanced Digital Network and connect more Wi-Fi enabled devices at home.
Call to get UVerse high-speed internet starting at $14.95 a month, a guaranteed price for 12 months. Or ask how to get your choice of a Kindle Fire HD, Sonos Play 3, or Xbox 360 free with other qualifying internet offers.
And get more speed for Wi-Fi gaming, more reliability than ever, and more connectivity between devices.
So call to get UVerse high-speed internet starting at $14.95 a month, a guaranteed price for 12 months. Or ask how to get your choice of a Kindle Fire HD, Sonos Play 3, or Xbox 360 free with other qualifying internet offers.
UVerse high-speed internet,
where all systems are go.
.org.
Back now with more of our coverage of this continuing breaking story, the terrorist attack at the Boston Marathon today. At least 2 dead, more than 86 wounded, many in critical condition at this hour. A little less than 2 hours ago, the president appeared in the briefing room at the White House. He has been briefed all day long by his FBI director and also the Secretary of Homeland Security. This is a photograph the White House gave us a little bit earlier today of the president speaking with the director of the FBI. It wasn't long after that that he appeared in the briefing room at the White House to update the nation on what was known, and our White House correspondent, Major Garrett, was there at the time. Major?
Scott, in his prepared remarks, President Obama did not call the twin explosions in Boston an act of terrorism. Moments after he left the briefing room, a top advisor to the president told us there is no doubt in Mr. Obama's mind that this is an act of terrorism and that he's ordered everyone in the federal government to treat this investigation as a terrorism investigation. The official said the president did not want to get ahead of the facts. And the key fact the White House doesn't know is this an act of foreign-inspired or domestic terrorism. And what the president wants the federal government to do is build this investigation slowly so the prosecution can proceed successfully.
We still do not know who did this or why. And people shouldn't jump to conclusions before we have all the facts. But make no mistake, we will get to the bottom of this. And we will find out who did this. We'll find out why they did this. Any responsible individuals, any responsible groups will feel the full weight of justice. Today is a holiday in Massachusetts, Patriots' Day. It's a day that celebrates the free and fiercely independent spirit that this great American city of Boston has reflected from the earliest days of our nation. And it's a day that draws the world to Boston's streets in a spirit of friendly competition. Boston is a tough and resilient town, so are its people. I'm supremely confident that Bostonians will pull together, take care of each other, and move forward as one proud city. And as they do, the American people will be with them every single step of the way.
The president will receive law enforcement and intelligence briefings throughout the night. He also said in his remarks, Scott, that his security has been increased in other American cities as necessary.
Thank you very much, Major. The president also mentioned that he had talked to the Republican leadership. He said that this is one of those days in which there are no Republicans or Democrats. We are all Americans, the president said. We will update you with the latest information in just a moment when we come back.
Whoa! Something just blew up at... Run! Go!
This is speeding. This is fast food. This is the express lane, and this is the fast track. This is the fastest in-home Wi-Fi. This is Xfinity Internet.
Reimagine your internet with Xfinity. Now with double the speeds on 2 of its most popular plans. Call for a great offer on Xfinity Internet from Comcast today, or ask about other plans starting at $24.99 a month for 6 months. Call 1-800-XFINITY today. Xfinity, the future of awesome.
AT&T is talking a lot about its so-called advanced digital network. But when they upgrade you to UVerse, you end up with the same old DSL speed. Xfinity is doubling the speeds at 2 of its fastest internet tiers. That's right, double. So now gaming, downloading, and streaming happen even quicker. Don't fall for UVerse. Xfinity Internet is 4 times faster, period.
Sign up today or get started with this great offer. Call 1-800-XFINITY.
There are those who brighten your day, the same way the smooth, creamy taste of Coffee Mate makes coffee and your day better. Coffee Mate, coffee's perfect mate.
More people in South Florida are waking up to CBS 4 News with Rhiannon Alley, Josh Benson, Lisette Gonzalez, and Vanessa Borsch. Tune in to South Florida's fastest growing morning news. CBS 4 News this morning, weekdays starting at 5 a.m. CBS Health Watch. Lymphoma is a malignant tumor that originates in the lymph nodes which protect organs against infection. Dr. Isidore Losos is a professor of medicine of hematology oncology at Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center.
Lymphoma is a complicated disease. It may affect different organs, different systems, and very frequently we need assistance from other specialties. We work as a team.
CBS Health Watch is sponsored by Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center, South Florida's most advanced cancer care.
A terrorist attack using multiple bombs near the finish line of the Boston Marathon today has killed at least 2. 86 people are hospitalized. Many of them are in critical condition. Some of the best coverage has come from our CBS News affiliate, WBZ. They have been on the story since the moment of the first explosion. Jonathan Elias was there when the bombs went off. John, can you tell us what you saw?
Scott, I was literally 30 feet away from when the bomb went off. We were sitting at the finish line. Our backs were to the grandstand. In front of us is the finish line, and it was such a joyous occasion with the runners finishing their 26.2 miles. And they were coming across the line, and we were high-fiving them. We were applauding them. Our photographer is a big fella. He stood up over everybody. And all of a sudden, this explosion happened across the street. A huge white cloud came up off the sidewalk. And initially, everybody froze, everybody, including those in the grandstand, not knowing what it was. And then the second explosion went off 2 blocks away, not more than 15 seconds or less. And that's when panic sort of struck in. Everybody started to run out. They were jumping on Boylston Street, running toward the runners that were coming down Boylston and running the other way, trying to get away from that area. We ran into the area to try and see what had happened, and it was then on the sidewalk I got a very good glimpse of what had happened. There were a lot of people lying on the ground. Nobody was screaming out and crying in pain. There was none of that. Everybody looked as though they were completely dazed, and the injuries were absolutely horrific. Legs had been blown off. There was one image that I have burned in my mind as a small child, maybe 5 years old, sitting upright, looked like he had been unharmed, but at his feet was either his mother or father, leg blown off. Their eyes were open, but clearly they were checked out or completely shell-shocked. And there was just literally blood all over the sidewalk. And within a matter of moments, EMS, the police, volunteers with the race, they came racing in to try and get these people out and try to treat them on the scene. And I'll set something else up for you. At the finish line of this marathon, normally they have a lot of wheelchairs set up for runners who come across the line fatigued. Maybe they got Charlie horse or a stress, or they're having problems breathing. All of those wheelchairs loaded up these people who were horrifically injured, and they wheeled them down about a block, maybe a block and a half, to the triage tent. And as they're wheeling them down, they're wheeling them in front of spectators that are still wondering what has just happened. And they saw with their own eyes, because they didn't have blankets covering these people, and it was a horrible scene. But once they got into the tent, they were treated, and ambulances came from all over the place, took them to the hospitals. And now this Copley Square, which is sort of the heart of the Back Bay of Boston, is completely closed down. The only people in here right now are emergency personnel. Scott?
Jonathan, let's take a moment and orient the folks at home about where these explosions occurred. We have a map of Boylston Street as we zoom into Boston. At the bottom of your screen, there is the finish line where the first explosion occurred. Second explosion was about 2 blocks back down Boylston Street. Jonathan, can you tell us what's at the scene of the second explosion?
That's a great question, Scott, because at the first bomb is right by the finish line, and by the time that bomb went off, where we were in the race, the crowd had started to thin. Had that happened an hour earlier, there were 10 deep in that part of the sidewalk, but because the race had sort of gone to almost the end, you had maybe 3 or 4 people deep on that sidewalk. And then 2 blocks up, the question you had asked, that is just spectators. They lined Boylston. I mean, literally for about 3/4 of a mile, that street is packed with spectators because it is the last leg of the race, so people are always screaming and yelling and giving their support to the runners, which helps them with their final kick to the race. And it was just that area. They knew that that would be the greatest number of spectators, and probably, that's why the area was targeted. And I can say this, I don't know of any runners that were actually impacted by the bomb, because the bombs were on the sidewalk, and the sidewalk spectators and the runners are blocked off by a fence. And when they pulled that fence down, we didn't see anybody in the street as far as runners. Runners were knocked off their feet, but we didn't see any runners taken away by ambulance because of these blasts.
Jonathan Elias of WBZ. Jonathan, thank you very much. And of course, as Jonathan reported, there was a third bomb also near the finish line, which did not detonate and has been recovered by police. We'll have more updates on the latest information in just a moment.
If you're ready to get more from your TV service, now's a great time to get AT&T UVerse TV. Make the switch.
Call to get UVerse TV starting at $19 a month with qualifying bundles. Get the same great price for 2 years. Add HBO and Cinemax and get the first 3 months free.
With UVerse TV, you can record 4 shows at once with a total home DVR that lets you play back, pause, or rewind your shows from any room. And ask about next day installation at no extra charge.
Call to get UVerse TV starting at $19 a month with qualifying bundles. Get the same great price for 2 years. And get a $150 promotion card. Plus, get a total home DVR included for life.
And now, exclusively from AT&T, adding our wireless receiver lets you move your TV where you want around the house, even outside, so you're no longer tied to the TV outlet.
AT&T UVerse, TV like you've never seen before.
The air conditioner's been out for 2 days.
I got it.
Stay cool with a new Carrier AC from Service America. Call 888-201-5759 today and get a free 32-inch HD TV with a new energy-efficient AC unit. New AC, free TV, only from Service America.
Made in America. It makes us walk a little taller and stand a little prouder. So you might just light up a room a little brighter, knowing that at FPL, we've reduced our use of foreign oil by 98%, from 40 million barrels a year to less than 1 million. And in its place, we're using cleaner, U.S.-produced natural gas and our state's very own sunshine. We're changing Florida's energy today to create a better tomorrow for all of us. At FPL, we're changing the current.
President Obama vowed this evening that whoever is behind the terrorist attack in Boston will, quote, feel the full weight of justice. Here's what we know at this hour. At least 2 people are dead, more than 80 others wounded, and many of them critically. 2 bombs went off on Boylston Street about 2 hours after the marathon winners crossed the line. The blasts came 15 seconds apart, less than 100 yards from each other. A 3rd bomb nearby was disarmed. CBS's Bob Orr has learned that authorities are questioning someone who has so far been cooperative. Bob?
Cooperative, Scott, but so far no one has been charged, and this person is not even being called a suspect. Investigators, though, are collecting an awful lot of evidence: surveillance tapes, bomb fragments, and witness statements along the parade route. They have a lot to go on to develop early leads, Scott.
Thank you, Bob. That's this expanded edition of the CBS Evening News. There will be more on your local station and at cbsnews.com. We will have the very latest coverage tomorrow on CBS This Morning. I'm Scott Pelley, CBS News. Good night.
CBS News special coverage continues with Norah O'Donnell in Boston tomorrow on CBS This Morning.
A South Florida woman in the Boston Marathon tells us what she experienced at 11.